Hello, everybody. David Serpa here, your unbiased moderator in French Valley Talk, and we are going to tackle this debate or town hall. Both Councilman and Pastor Brian Hawkins was invited, as was Congressman Ruiz. However, Congressman Ruiz declined after one of his aides had said that he would be there or his aide would be there to debate Councilman Hawkins. But Councilman Hawkins is here to speak with us in the flesh. It is so good to see you. I'm glad that you could attend. Thank you for being here.
I'm glad to be here too as well.
All right, so you were one of 6 Republican hopefuls in the jungle primary when we were opening our community during COVID-19. We interviewed you on our community news. Your message from the start has been, this is not Republicans versus Democrats. Since winning a top 2 spot in California's jungle primary, you've been on KSQ, OAN, Newsmax, and all over your district. Welcome to the stage, Brian Hawkins.
Thank you. And I appreciate being here, and thank you for those who have tuned in. I pray that something that I say really inspire people to get out and go vote. The election is this Tuesday, and so I'm excited to be here and want to be transparent. I always say, get to know the people that's running for office. I'm not afraid to be in front of the camera. I'm not afraid to be asked questions. And so, this is what our country is built on, and so I'm here.
In fact, when I tweeted at you to ask if you would like to debate, you confirmed in less than 5 minutes.
Oh yeah, absolutely. The people have a right to, question, their elected officials, and whoever wants to. It could be somebody in front of a pizza shop. I'm willing to answer questions anywhere, and I don't run from any conversation or any debate with anyone.
Awesome. I really appreciate that. I'm going to timestamp this video. I'm going to put all of the topics of conversation in the comments on YouTube and on Facebook so that you can jump to a topic that you're interested in after the video. But let's go ahead and let's move forward. Who are you and why are you running for Congress?
So, it's a loaded question, and if you would have asked me that a year ago, and I know who I am, but why I'm running for Congress, definitely didn't have an answer until about a few months ago. I'm Pastor Brian Hawkins. I always tell people I'm a pastor, even though I am an elected official. It just reminds people that I answer to God first and foremost, and then I love serving. That's something that I enjoy doing. I love looking for other ways to serve. Once I'm done with one assignment, just like a waiter at a restaurant that's waiting on many tables, I'm always looking to find the next table to serve, the next door to open. And when I go to events, you'll see me sometimes as the last person leaving, trying to put tables away and helping individuals out. I'm just somebody that lives in the community. When you look at people who run for office, you think that somebody that went to college for 8, 10, 12 years and got tons of degrees on the walls, but no, I'm just someone that lives in the community. I'm your next door neighbor. I'm the Mr. Rogers in the community. I'm really trying to be people's neighbors and finding out ways that I can help. When I started pastoring a church, my first reason wasn't really to pastor, it was really just to find a need in the community. A shepherd's heart is something that I've always had from my childhood. And so, I've taken that mindset into the political realm, just serving. I always told myself I'm a 365 pastor. Every day I'm always looking to serve. Every day I'm always looking to, find a way to help somebody. And I just looked at politics as the same way. And people say, what's the difference between being a pastor and being a politician? I said, nothing really. They're the same thing if your heart is in the right place to serve. And the reason why I said, if you would have asked me a year ago, why am I running? I'm reminded of the movie Forrest Gump. And so I'm going to tell you right now, and I love movies, so I'll preface a lot of movies. But in the movie Forrest Gump, there was a scene when Forrest Gump just walked off the porch and just began to run. And he didn't have a reason. And the media came out and it was asking him tons of questions. Why are you running? Are you running to cure world hunger? Are you wanting to, just have a lot of questions. He didn't have any reason other than he just wanted to run. But there was an inspiration behind his run. People started to get up and they started to get inspired. And if anything, my run is getting people up and getting them inspired to believe in what's possible. I've always loved politics. I've always loved being a voice. And at the end of the day, I had to ask myself, if there's somebody in DC that sound like the situations that I'm dealing with? Is there somebody that's speaking towards my issues? And I didn't find anyone. And so I said, why not go and be that voice that resonate with the rest of America and not with the media?
I'm looking forward to tackling a lot of those issues here tonight because I feel like that you are talking about a lot that is not being covered. And I was surprised to hear the way that you were talking about the Salton Sea. I've been surprised to hear the way that you've talked about Ukraine, and we're going to get into those issues in just a few moments. So there's really a pattern that we're seeing across the country where people are not agreeing to debate. Incumbents especially are not agreeing to debate. We're seeing it in Arizona. I believe that we saw it in Florida. We're seeing it in our district here with Congressman Calvert, who didn't want to debate Democrat Will Rawlins, who is running against him. You, on the other hand, have been anxious to debate. You said during your Desert Sun debate, which was not open to the public and was held over Zoom, but was the only debate that was participated in this election cycle between you and Ruiz, that it's a shame that we couldn't do this in person. Why did you feel like it was so important to debate Congressman Ruiz in person and to do it in front of the public?
Well, when you think about people that's in elected positions, I'm an elected official, and we need to be held accountable to every vote, to every accusation, to the current climate, that's going on. And right now, it's a hot topic: the economy, inflation, gas prices, the mask mandates, COVID mandates, the border issues, fentanyl. There's a plethora of issues that when you're an elected official, that vote calls. This is the cause and the effect. And I think that a lot of people stay away from debates because they don't want to be asked these questions. How could you vote knowing there's unintended consequences? Now, I would appreciate someone to come along and say, hey, when we voted, this was the intel and the information that we was given at the time, but we were given new information later, and I wish I can take back that vote. But they're not even willing to say that. Now we're into no one's willing to, redact, some of the, votes that have happened that have caused the issue that we're faced with.
Sure.
And we've seen, AOC just a few weeks ago, she was at a town hall and, 4 years ago when people were loving her, the same people are now calling for her resignation. We're calling for her to leave her party. And so I think that a lot of individuals are, afraid to expose themselves publicly, to be ridiculed publicly. Many individuals don't know how to handle, being, having their feet to the fire, and being asked those questions. That's why it's interesting when I think of federal elected officials. They're not walking through Walmart. They're not walking through Stater Brothers. Mm-hmm. People that sit local like myself, once I leave council from our meeting, people are seeing me out in the community. And so I think a lot of times people want to stay hidden, because the more you stay hidden, the less you have to give answer to. And I think that's the reason why many people, because they know that the answers that they got to give, they might not get reelected on.
I think that that's a great answer. Honestly and truthfully, I think that our elected officials, if they thought that they were going to be applauded, they'd be walking around in public all the time. But there I am showing my bias. So what is to give fire? What is to give? Dr. Viktor Frankl said, "What is to give light must endure burning." And so I think that as a public official, you're there to serve. And so part of that comes the fire. You mentioned AOC. I want to talk about Dr. Ruiz, Congressman Ruiz. And I want to talk about national defense specifically, because we're going to get to what both of them have said recently. Congressman Ruiz called Vladimir Putin a thug. He blamed him for inflation. He said that there is a moral and humanitarian reason to protect our democracy, to stand up and protect democracy in our country and around the world. He said, "I've been supportive and have voted for all of the economic and military aid that the Ukrainian military needs." He also said, "We will continue to support and stand with the people in Ukraine. We've spent anywhere from $400 to $800 billion in Ukraine. Where do you stand? And is our democracy at stake in Ukraine?"
It is, and I've gone on record, and this is one of the things that I think the Desert Sun News didn't want to publish this debate because of these comments. And not that I'm not supportive of democracy across the country, but not at the cost of the democracy here in America. Because we are the last line of freedom. We are the only country that's willing to risk everything for global democracy around the world, but at what cost? I remember Congressman Ruiz was quoted, or even said it, that, we don't mind feeling a little pinch at the gas station to establish democracy across the country. A lot of people don't feel the same way. And it's kind of hard to support the war in Ukraine with the amount of money that we're giving over there. We have no way of tracking where this money is going. And that's one of the big hurdles that it found me to not want to support or push more support there. But my biggest concern is the war that's right here in our own country. We're losing bodies here in America, our public school system, the many, mass shootings, the war at the border. We're not even talking about, the drugs that are coming over here, and how, demoralized our, Border Patrol agents, they just went through a scandal, with the horse and the whip. The media just ran our Border Patrol agents through the mud. And then once it came out that it wasn't a whip, that they wasn't, chasing these migrants down with, slave tactics, or, slave trader tactics, there was no apology in the newspaper. They just, let's go on to the next segment of the news. And I think that it's important that we understand that America can't just keep, putting itself in a position of bankruptcy. Our national debt is over $30 trillion, $30 trillion. And we're still sending hundreds of billions of dollars over into Ukraine without no solution. We watched Afghanistan, trillions of dollars, 20 years, trillions of dollars. And Afghanistan is in a worse place than when we first went over there 20 years ago. And so at the end of the day, we have to start looking at the decisions that we're making with our national security. Is America making the best decisions by getting involved? This was a situation that happened right after the Revolutionary War, and France had wanted America's support. And so, at some place we have to, as a parent would say, let you figure this out. Because if we continue to, and it's a quote that I love, is that our humanitarian efforts is going to be the death of this country. We can't help everyone. We can't go and solve everyone's problems and not just ignore the problems here in our own country.
That's a great segue to my next question. The Hmong in Vietnam, the Iraqi people during the fall of Iraq, the Afghans during the fall of Afghanistan. We're in Ukraine. We're back in Haiti. We're arming Saudi Arabia in what many would call a genocide in Yemen. We're all over Northern Africa. It's been said the only thing more dangerous than being an enemy to America is being a friend. What would be your stance on national defense when it comes to foreign intervention, and what should our role be in Ukraine?
So here's the thing, right? And I get it. America has positioned itself in the eyes of so many individuals as a global superpower. The reality of it is we've really just a global consumer. America is around because we consume so much. And because China is a huge maker of products, America is consuming so much. So we're helping other countries stay in power because of our need to have the latest, greatest, newest anything. And we're not thinking about our security. Our security right now with our military is in jeopardy. You look at the way we're doing our training now. I was talking to a lot of recruitment. Our recruiting is down. A lot of people's not talking about that. So you talk about national defense. We're not even going to have an army strong enough to even defend ourselves. Our cybersecurity, we're not even thinking about new technological warfare. We went through COVID-19 attack, right? I mean, that was a chemical warfare, and that was, I used to say, it was kind of remind me when I was a kid, a test of the emergency broadcast system. The COVID-19 was a test, and we're failing at it miserably. And we're watching other countries prepare themselves to become stronger and stronger and stronger, while our defense, our security is becoming weaker and weaker. We're removing so much money. We're not even thinking about strengthening up our military. our role in Ukraine, and as I said before, the government of Ukraine is going to have to learn how to step up a lot stronger than what they have been showing now. It's kind of like what happened with Afghanistan and trying to train their soldiers. We can't train to leave our military in a country and hoping that they're going to take over. At the end of the day, America, one, needs to pull back and strengthen itself. We need to strengthen America because America is divided. And how can you go and give lessons to any foreign countries when our country itself is divided? We're in the midst of a civil war ourselves. And this is one of the reasons why the Federalist Paper was written. This is one of the reasons why our military was created, because our founding fathers and the writers, Alexander Hamilton, and understood that we were on the brink of a civil war, that it was going to be imminent, it was going to happen. And the last thing we wanted to do was be a divided country and watching other, nations come in and attack us. And this is exactly what I see playing out all over again, the War of 1812. If we don't solidify our country, if we don't solidify our national defense, we're going to be food for the pickings. Our border is wide open. Over 2 million people have come through our borders this year alone that we have no idea of who's here. And you're talking about an attack from the inside. We think 9/11 was something. Imagine what's going to happen when the individual, these sleeper cells that are here in America, they are. We're so focused on Kanye West and the Kardashians, but there are people already in the soil of America that is meant to do this country harm.
Why haven't they?
Second Amendment.
Yeah, so there's a couple of things that I would push back here on this.
Go ahead.
One of those is, so recruitment is down. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I'm a Marine Corps combat veteran, went to Afghanistan, and I think that a lot of people are disenchanted with the military right now because of our policy on national defense.
Oh, I agree.
And I think that we would agree on a lot of things. One of the things that you said was that you were worried about national defense spending being down, but national defense spending is up every year. And it continues to go up. And we're spending about $800 billion a year on defense. And we have almost 800 foreign military bases. I think that we're very worried about a foreign threat. And I would agree that our threat is more from within, from falling apart from within, like Rome, for example.
Right.
Well,
that was a quote. I'm sorry.
Yeah, please, go ahead.
Yeah, that was a quote by Abraham Lincoln, to destroy our nation would be from within. Mm-hmm. And, and that's the reason why I said when I think about our Civil War, and you hear this conversation, and these are some of the things that are on the chatters is about having a Civil War. Mm-hmm. And I'm really concerned with that. Yeah.
What would that look like?
It's interesting to say, when you look at the mindset of council culture, that right there is becoming an out-of-hand strategy that is destroying so many people. And I think that, the terms of war, it's not so much what I think of as, because, war changes over the time. When you think about, the Revolutionary War and how the strategies was different. And you look at now, a lot of it is cyber, Gulf War, the Desert War, Desert Storm, you look at how the different wars were fought. Today, I believe, when you look at technology, when you look at the control, it's almost like the wars were dumbing down our children. I look at it as the way it's happening in the school systems, is that, the children aren't learning at the rate of other nations, mm-hmm. And being able to compete on a global scale economically. And, so I think that, look at, I was watching a documentary or it was a video about, how TikTok, how someone can post a video here in America and it's all the, jokes and, pranks. Those are the videos that are going viral. But in other countries, to go viral is, when you're doing this like an assignment, or when you do, you get an award somewhere, that's how you go viral in other countries. But here, it just seemed like the more we're dumbing down our children to where we're not even prepared or ready for life or ready for real, like school is not teaching children how to be critical thinkers.
Okay.
And so it's like, I feel like, that war is going to be, it's like a mental warfare.
Okay.
And you notice how we're opening up a lot of these behavioral health, institutions. A lot of the government funding is going towards mental health. Like the whole world is trying to put America on a couch.
Yeah.
And that's how I feel like,
I want to get to mental health here in a little while, but let's stay on national defense here for just a moment. I just want to give you a moment to address the Civil War comment. Okay. So Republican leader McCarthy said, in the middle of a recession, people are not going to want to give Ukraine a blank check with no strings attached. But there are pro-war and anti-diplomacy types on both sides. Ken Calvert, a Republican who has endorsed you, released bipartisan legislation with the following statement. The United States must continue to support the people in Ukraine in their valiant defense of liberty and independence with both military and humanitarian aid. He also happens to sit in the Appropriations Committee as the ranking member of Defense. Will you be willing to stand up to members of your own party in funding these forever wars and in encouraging diplomacy?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I stand by my statement when I said this is not Republican versus Democrat. I'm not going to DC to just fall in line with the talking points that is being given. I'm not asking someone to hand me a voter guide to how you're supposed to vote when you get into Congress. My goal is, my plan is to go there to be a voice of what the people are saying here in the 25th Congressional District. There are people who are fed up with the funding. There are people who are looking at their bank accounts. They're looking at the gas pump. And if you're going to tell me that the war in Ukraine is the result of inflation, there are many people that would say, well, why are we even involved in the first place? I remember there was a comment early on that, Russia was trying to bait America into coming into this war. And so, when you talk to the people who elect us in the office, the seat is the representative, and I'm there to represent the people. And that's not the conversation that people are giving me to take to DC. And so I'm not going to DC with the voice of the people to get there and walk away with a vote that represent the people that are in Congress. No, I'm going there to represent what the people are asking for.
And what are the people asking for when it comes to Ukraine?
Yeah, so like I said, the transparency. If you're talking about funding the war, make it make sense.
Yep.
Why are we sending billions of dollars to Ukraine? And people are asking these same questions. We're sending military weapons. We just saw billions of dollars worth of weapons left in Afghanistan. So, I get it. People have, politicians under the impression that people have short-term memory. But we do remember the weapons that were left in Afghanistan, and so the last thing we want to do is find ourselves repeating in Afghanistan all over again. There's no end date to the war in Ukraine. Vladimir Putin knew what he was doing when he invaded Ukraine, and so if there's no end date, we're going to find ourselves, 20 years later, and mad at the president for doing a debauched withdrawal, and 13 servicemen, maybe it'd be worse next time. Who knows who's going to walk into an airport in Ukraine and and kill Marines, all over again. And we got to be responsible. We got to make intelligent decisions. And I can't be that person that's willing to do this all over again.
So case in point, the 101st Airborne is in Romania, 3 miles from the border with Ukraine. And like I said, I'm an infantryman. I know how quickly these things spiral out of control. Ruiz has been solid on burn pits. I'll give him kudos on that. However, he's been solid on burn pits in running a terrible VA center and starting wars, which will have more veterans who will have new issues. In Vietnam, it was Agent Orange. This one, it was burn pits. And, you can make grandstanding speeches, but while the VA Loma Linda falls apart, the VA Murrieta clinic falls apart. I was excited about it. I spent 1.5 years trying to get an appointment with a primary care, and it's been difficult. Veterans are not getting care here in this district. We spend about $900 billion a year on defense, half of which goes directly to private military contractors. Many Americans feel the defense budget has gotten out of hand. The rest aren't paying attention. Would you dedicate yourself to reallocating some of these funds to be spent in this country? And how much of those funds would you spend in this country?
So as a son of a veteran,
Yes.
It's in a personal conversation. My grandfather fought in World War II. And so when you talk about, we just got a legislation passed for Vietnam. I mean, there are people who wasn't even alive during the Vietnam War.
Mm-hmm.
So you think about that and put that into perspective. It just go to show you how far back we are in supporting. And I hear this a lot. This is one of those campaign talking speeches that many people give. I want to go out and help vets, and I want to make it easier. The reality of it is, I wish veterans were more open and honest about waiting a year to see a doctor.
Mm-hmm.
I was talking to a Marine maybe a few months ago, and I think I posted this picture. He's missing 3 fingers off of his left hand, I believe, and he has a hook on the right hand. Half his face and his body is burned. And he was telling me that the nurses come to his home often trying to take away his benefits. And I'm like, how can you, right, like, to think about that, how can you sit up here and visit this man, right, knowing what he, it's one thing, to give your life, but this man is living with a lifetime of scars. Like, these scars, they're not going to go away. And to look for reasons to lower his benefits. And this is not just one person. I'm pretty sure you hear this a lot. I
have a laundry list,
right?
But I don't want to dime anybody out.
This is a conversation. I have a friend right now, and he reached out to me. I was out, and I have to get this out there because I want you to understand how people are being overlooked. Mm-hmm. There's a gentleman that served in the Army for 38 years. I had just got through doing about 6 events one day, and he sent a message to me on Instagram. And this was about 11 o'clock. My wife, can attest to it. As a matter of fact, he's watching it. He responded. But he sent me a message at 11 o'clock at night. And when he told me he served 38 years, I was tired. I had been out all day. But when he told me he served 38 years in the military, and he left me his phone number, I called him immediately that same night. We stayed on the phone for about an hour. And the only thing he was asking for was the letter from the president, because he had served over 30 years in the military. And he hadn't been given this letter from the president after serving 38 years. Like, he didn't want anything else. He just wanted a piece of paper with the president's signature on it, mm-hmm. just to be acknowledged for his service. And so when you think about, what our veterans go through, we wouldn't have a country without our military. Mm-hmm. There is no America without our military. And it's sad that we're still here talking about our veterans. I haven't sat down and looked at exactly the percentage amount that would go towards, our VA. But I do know this much. Our veterans shouldn't have to wait a day to be seen, mm-hmm. because civilians don't have to wait a year to be seen.
Agreed.
I've never put on a uniform. My brother's Marine, my father's Navy. I've never put on a uniform, but I know the sacrifice that they have. I know what my uncle, who did 22 years, you can say Coast Guard. I know there's a gray area. I know how some people feel.
No gray area.
Thank you. I appreciate that. But at the end of the day, I feel like having a conversation every election cycle about our veterans is ridiculous. And that's just the reality of it. It's ridiculous. The PACT Act was great, but there are veterans who are being turned away at normal hospitals. Mm-hmm. Every hospital across this country should have a front line walk straight to for our veterans. Every hospital. There should not be a wait at any hospital. There should be an honor to serve our veterans. And the fact that, down in Imperial County, where they don't have a VA hospital, that was one of the requests that they were asking. Can you figure out a way to get us a VA hospital in the Imperial County? Our district goes all the way down there. So I'm bringing this out. We need to have a final one-cut question. Have you ever served? There should be no 60%, 80%. There should be 100% benefits. without any questions asked. And that's how I feel. And if anybody feel different and anybody don't have a heart for those who have served, then this isn't the country for you.
Well, I can tell you a lot of people are struggling. I appreciate the sentiment. I hope that if you are able to get elected, that you're able to open up a VA clinic. I'd encourage you that to keep up on that VA clinic, because I'll tell you, they're not mental health facilities. I know that because a veteran has told me. There's nobody in charge of it. Repeatedly, they turn people away for appointments that have been scheduled because a provider has not been rehired after getting there and realizing it's a mess and leaving. And I know for a fact that certain people have been contacted about this. So let's move on to the economy, shall we? Because it's the economy, stupid, right? Inflation, spending. Our dollar isn't going as far as it was going just 2 years ago. Gas, groceries, utilities, water, and housing all cost significantly more, and wages are not keeping up. What is your plan to address inflation issues for real people on Main Street?
So, inflation, when you look at it, I was sharing this with someone and kind of give the analogy of the Titanic, when you were thinking about the three parts of the ship that the water just filled up in 3 compartments, the ship could have stayed afloat. But the fact that it filled up 4 compartments and pulled the entire ship down, when you look at what happened in 2020, and from all of the moment that the president went into office, obviously we got hit with COVID. We can say it was planned, but at the end of the day, the response that we gave to COVID shut everything down. Mm-hmm. We shut down people's ability to go to work. And so now we're not making as much tax dollars. But then you throw in money, and the moment you start introducing billions of dollars without any work, 14.7% unemployment rate. I mean, numbers we hadn't seen since the Great Depression. And so, but then you shut down the Keystone Pipeline, and then you start removing permits, and now you no longer drill for oil. And a lot of people don't know that the United States is the #1 producers in oil. It's a conversation that people are not ready to have, but we're the #1 producers in oil, but we're not producing oil. We're sitting on 50 billion gallons of oil, 50 billion gallons. And so, all these different things is just contributing. Then we hold our goods out at the docks. We saw that during Christmas time. That's why you're seeing all these pallet deals going on, these deal businesses opening up all across the country. And if 2020 taught us anything, because now our dealings with China is going to be different. Mm-hmm. Things are going to go through, the import. It's going to take a lot longer because it got to go through all of the checkpoints to make sure that nothing is contaminated. And so, goods are being held back. And as long as goods are being held back, the demand is going to be there, but the supply is going to be low. Well, this is a really good time to institute an American-made agenda. We need a Made in America Act, right? That those who want to really get a hold of this economy. I didn't realize how much everything was made in China until China got shut down and we couldn't bring anything in. And I start talking to, the managers of Walmart. I start seeing more Made in America products on the shelf. Mm-hmm. So there were a lot of businesses that thrived for that moment, but then at the same time, they couldn't extend long contracts with Walmart because they knew eventually the pandemic was going to shut down. And now you see these massive warehouses opening up. And so, I think that right there is a bad strategy too, because all you're doing is building warehouses to store up all of the made in other country products, which is going to eventually shut down a lot of American-made businesses. And people don't see that strategy. So I'm very leery of a lot of warehouses popping up because you're trying to hoard for the next pandemic. Like you're already in your mind thinking of a pandemic on the horizon, or just in case we won't have to worry about shipping containers holding all the goods out in the ocean. But we need an Made in America agenda, to where we're inspiring, people to start making products that are going to fit the everyday life that we have here. and be proud of it.
I agree. There needs to be a Made in America agenda. That's the first time I've heard that term. I also like, you mentioned that we're the #1 producer of oil. I fact checked that when I heard you say that in another video, and it is absolutely 100% true. You would think that we are an oil poor nation with the way that we talk about Russia and Saudi Arabia. Getting back to one part of the economy, which is the budget, one of the concerns amongst those on the left, some Democrats, is that if a Republican were to be elected to Congress right now during part of this red wave, that there would be plans to cut Social Security and Medicare. Would that be on the agenda for you if you were to go to DC?
Absolutely not. And I don't know where that conversation. Well, I can see where it comes, but no, just a simple no. As a matter of fact, and I know that they just recently increased Social Security, but I think that we should have increased it a long time ago. It's unfortunate that we're playing with our seniors, and that's one of the things that I was talking about. Because I speak to a lot of seniors, and I've said this many times, and for those who are seniors that are watching that are retired, I apologize because, the way we keep going, most of your retirement is going to be gone in about the next 3 to 5 years, so you're going to have to unretire just so you can work to retire again. And I don't believe that anyone should have to, unretire after they didn't spend their years, positioning themselves to be where they're at. But because of mismanagement of resources and because we have greed and politics, that we're not thinking about our seniors. And, I think that was one of the comments that was early on with the pandemic. Is this a warfare against our seniors? You heard it, it was a conspiracy theory talk, but it's like, oh, that's a good way to eradicate, Medicare and, Social Security, but it's nothing, funny about that at all.
You said a lot of things that you would never hear a Republican say, I feel like, for the most part, like increase Social Security or increase Medicare, or that we should have done it a long time ago. Now, unretire. That's what a lot of people are looking at, just to stay in the same state as their kids or their grandkids, or they're looking at, potentially looking around the country and not finding a place for them to relocate to. So with a lot of the strain on our seniors, one of the other concerns coming from seniors is that there would be a push to privatize Social Security. Any thoughts on that?
No, so I don't have a thought on that. I don't, because here's my thing. I'm not a senior. I haven't become a senior yet. However, I do talk to seniors, and I know what concerns them. And at the end of the day, I want to make sure that our seniors have confidence in knowing that what they got to pay, because they're already struggling to survive on the Social Security that they have now. And it's unfortunate that our seniors are being put in tough situations. And as you continue to see, inflation, that same amount of money, they were already stretching it before it got to 9.3%.
Agreed.
So, the last thing I want to do is add more stress to them having to decide on, us privatizing Social Security. I think that, the current system we have has been fine for our seniors. I just think that we need to increase it, to where they're not having to, stretch and struggle even more.
I appreciate you speaking plainly about Social Security and Medicare. One of the things that you hear a lot from people on the right, libertarians, Republicans, is running government like a business. And one of the things that regular business owners do when they're putting pen to paper is audit their business to figure out where they are losing money. There are two things that Americans have become known for, and that's waging wars and printing money. And that has caught up with us in a big way. This has put the dollar status at risk as the world currency. The world is reacting accordingly, and you now see Russia, China, and Saudi Arabia working together to establish their own emerging currency. Would you favor an audit of government spending here in America for the sake of national defense?
Absolutely. I would favor an audit over America's spending just on the sake of sanity. And so because we talk about the amount of money that was wasted during 2020 and, waiting to see the full reports. But I know just talking to pawn shop owners, right, which is a good spot to talk with. Yeah, I met a lot of pawn shop owners in the midst of me campaigning. And they said for a period of time, people were buying up all the jewelry, gold and everything just to go out and look lavish. And then a few months later, they found themselves pawning that same jewelry all over again. So where we thought we were stimulating the economy and helping people out, there were a lot of wasted money, PPP loans that were given to fraudulent businesses. And so, there's not any oversight on government spending, public schools, how much money is wasted there. And I think
would you favor an audit of the PPP loans?
Absolutely.
The schools?
I would favor an audit on PPP loans. I would favor an audit on public school spending. I would favor an audit on welfare. I would favor an audit on any dollar that has gone out of the government. We're spending money on programs that don't even work or that are, and so at the end of the day, we need to find out where all the money is going, who it's going to, and is it going to what it's intended to do. And this is a very simple thing. For instance, $12 billion that we spent over the last 2 years here in California on homelessness, but it's growing. And then you hear the report that they don't want the services. And so why are we still spending money in places that it's not working? Somewhere we got to, draw back, go back to the drawing board, old school Acme cartoon, and we got to, look at this from a different perspective. Because if not, we're going to just keep throwing money at it. And the problem is growing. Homelessness is growing 12% every year. And so, there's a lot of wasted money that we're not being honest with ourselves with the outcome.
There is a lot of wasted money, and we're finding a lot of money even without performing an audit. The $97 billion surplus in the state of California, I'd like to address that here in a moment. But before we get there, kind of staying on that national defense and spending, Vice President Harris said in the past, wars have been fought over oil. In a very short time, we could see wars fought over water. What are we doing?
Yeah. It's interesting that you mentioned that. And why are we fighting over water? It just goes to show you the control that the government have. Our country, this planet is 2/3 water. And the idea that we're going to be fighting over something that we can visibly see, all across the world, which is sad. We have the technology to turn seawater into fresh water.
There you go.
We have the ability, think about that. We have the ability to turn 2/3 of the water into fresh water. Desalinization plants that they have down in San Diego right now is able to do just that. So how is it that we're having a water shortage? How is it that we're having a conversation of a water shortage? It's just...
I agree with you. And so, I would wonder why we're not investing in desalination. I would wonder why we're not investing in nuclear energy, but we'll get there. In the event of a successful audit, I believe we'll find a surplus. Like I said, the state of California, $97 billion surplus without performing an audit on government spending. Andrew Yang brought UBI to the national conversation. If we were to run government like a business, we would pay dividends like a successful business. Alaska pays oil dividends. Native Americans receive dividends based on profits from their casinos. Would you support a Golden State dividend or an American dividend in the event that a Made in America agenda works?
An American dividend. And here's the thing. If we run America like a business, we would have closed America a long time ago. Because we're in debt, $30 trillion. So I don't understand this statement about running America like a business, because where's the profit? And one, America doesn't even make a profit. America's taking money from those who are working anyway. So the last time I checked, the government doesn't have a job. The government is just, you're spending money from people who are working, but you're spending money as though you've worked for it.
I'm looking at it, and our next topic is energy, and I think that there is a way to look at all of that oil and all of that water and all of that nuclear energy potential and tap into that. But the problem is the private sector is not equipped to take on nuclear energy or to take on desalination plants. And do we want the private sector to own our water? And so my highly controversial question would be, is it time to nationalize water and energy and start producing a domestic product that we can export?
Absolutely. Absolutely. There's a reason why we say God bless America. And really, we shouldn't be saying God bless America. We should be saying God blessed America. This nation is blessed. The fact that this soil that we sitting on, is able to produce the type of agriculture, the type of fruits. A lot of people don't know the Imperial County produces 85% of the nation's winter vegetables.
Wow.
85% of the nation's winter vegetables. 83% of the vegetation that we provide from the state of California feeds the entire world. Feeds the entire nation. So you got to think about that. And we already talked about being the number one producer in oil.
Mm-hmm.
America has resources. And the idea, you think of all the other nations, think of what can happen on the soil of this country. God has blessed this nation, and to be an overseer of this nation, you talk about mismanagement of one of the Earth's greatest land resources.
Mm-hmm.
One of the largest lithium deposit mines is right here in this country. Two of them. One is in northern Nevada, and the other one is in this congressional district, the Salton Sea.
Yes, sir.
And so when you think about water, when you think about the oil, when you think about lithium, since now there cell phones is everywhere, electric cars, this country has enough to provide for so much, and there's no way we should be in debt. What we have to offer, America has more to offer, but we're not thinking that. Other countries are. Other countries are looking at the American agenda, and they're hearing 10 years from now. The moment Newsom went and said 2035. Electric cars. You know what other countries start doing? They start training their children. They start sending their kids to working and learning how to be in these plants, to learn how to do battery power. So that way, when those jobs become available, look at how many jobs that they're saying is here in America that people aren't even qualified for.
Sure.
Because they're not even thinking about that skill set. So we're not even directing our children into that field.
We certainly are not preparing for the future.
Oh, no, absolutely not.
I can admire that you're looking around the world and that you're taking some notes.
Well, around the world is looking at us. They're like, hey,
we got to figure out what works, right? One way or another. And I'm glad that you brought up the electric vehicles, because I think that that's an important thing to talk about. The push towards electric cars is noble, but the grid can't support it currently. A nuclear facility costs between $2 and $4 billion to build, and meanwhile we are tearing them down in California. Governor Newsom decommissioned the San Onofre nuclear power plant while mandating a push towards towards electric cars for the public. Many experts are looking at nuclear as a solution for clean, renewable energy. What is your stance on nuclear energy?
I'm in favor of it, and as you stated right there, because it is clean energy. I'm not opposed to electric, but I'm not going to go all in. I'm not about to double down, and I'm definitely not about to move away from reliable energy. Like we always say, don't mess off for sure money for some more money and end up with no money. And this is what we're doing. We're like, let's go and get all electric. Let's push everybody to electric. But then, you just said it now. We don't even have enough electricity on the grid to provide and support it. I think
100%.
about this thing right here. How many people would take an electric flight?
Mm-hmm. Mm.
That right there is like your statement right there. Like all of these, I want to go green. I want to go electric. How many people would get on the first electric airplane?
Put your money on it. Get up in the air.
Yeah. Let me see. Let me see you get on an electric plane and then tell me you all in on electric.
Damn. Better be a short flight.
Yeah, you know.
It better be a short flight. Okay, so that's a great point. So in 2021, the United States exported about 8.63 million, over 8.5 million barrels, 8.5 million barrels of gasoline per day. It's hard to quantify. And imported about 8.47 million barrels per day of petroleum. The problem is not that we're not drilling. Oil companies are exporting American oil to foreign countries. I'm actually blown away by the fact that you said that you would consider nationalizing oil, because my question was going to be, what would you do to address the pain that people are feeling at the pump?
Well, you know, like I said, you know, when you think about the pain that we're feeling at the pump, why is that? You know, why are we not drilling? Why are we not providing more permits to drill? Why are we not providing more in-home oil right here in America? You know, we were oil independent. Remember, we were energy independent 2 years ago. You know, we wasn't in this place that we are in now. So what happened? And this is the problem, and I think that because there was so much anger and hate towards President Trump that they used during the campaign, it's like, hey, vote for me, I'm not Trump. So now I got to go all in and double down on everything that the president had done. And so it caused a ripple effect because you didn't realize some of these policies were actually good for our country. Mm-hmm. But because you hated him so much, you couldn't go to the people that had just voted him out and say, hey, we're not going to pull back on this one because this was actually a good policy. No, you got to, you know, that quote, you got to die with the lie. You got to, once they went all in, you got to stay all in.
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, wait.
Unfortunately, we become a country where we discuss people over policy. And I think that that's become a massive Achilles heel that is worth addressing. Someone posted recently, I remember January 6th. Oil was $2 a gallon. Ruiz blamed Russia for oil prices. And you brought to my attention through the debate that I watched prior that the U.S. is actually the world's top producer of oil, not Saudi Arabia. They're number 2. They produce 12% of the world's oil. Russia is number 3. They produce 11%. America is the number 1 producer of oil. We produce 20% of the world's oil, and we only have about 4% of the world's population.
The problem is, and then to be honest, gas prices was going up before Russia decided to invade Ukraine.
There it is.
So you can't blame the war in Ukraine as the reason why prices were going up. They were already going up. They started to go up the moment that Biden started to make decisions regarding cutting off energy here in America.
So another crucial reserve that we are running low on, despite the planet being covered with it, is water. 1 in 10 Americans can't afford water. Water costs have gone up 65% since 2009. Low-income Americans spend about 12% of their income on water cost. 1 million people throughout the state of California do not have access to clean drinking water. Carlsbad and their desalination plant costs about $1 billion to build. We've spent about $54 billion in Ukraine. It seems like it's a problem that we can fix. Why are Californians going without clean drinking water?
I have to ask myself this question. Why are we even talking about water?
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like, nobody can create water. Like, this is an element that was here before we were here. Like, if I want to go biblical, that was in Genesis. And here we are in 2022 talking about water. And not only are we talking about water, we're looking at policies that are causing, a lot of neglect into some of these communities. Many legislators know that when you look at the infrastructure in many of these cities, many of them know how long these water, treatment facilities have been around. In our city, our water treatment facility hasn't been updated since 1965. So we're dealing with eroded pipes, and many of them have shut down and caused, contamination. So we had to shut down and redivert our pipes so we can, use 3 wells instead of 4. And this is what we're doing in the city of San Jacinto as we're rebuilding our treatment facility. And we're all seeing what's happening in Jackson, Mississippi. This has really come down to legislation. This is a control tactics. Everything that we're looking at is a way to control people and to bring people into fear. The same way they can shut off your water at home, you can shut off water from the source. You can shut down from the Colorado River. The fact that we're not building desalination plants, if we really are worried about the historic drought, and I get it, it's been hotter, but Earth has been hotter than this before. The hottest temperatures recorded in Death Valley, and I want to say maybe in the early 1900s, was 134 degrees. So it's not like Earth has never been hot before. So this is not an uncommon temperature for us to be in. So to blame that on climate change, climate changes every day. It was 93 degrees yesterday, and I woke up this morning, it was cold, raining outside of my house. So to say that our climate doesn't change and shift often, we got to stop using these tactics, these fear conversations to cause people to go in and vote so they can stay in power. At the end of the day, we need to start looking at how we can better treat the water that we have, because we have technology now that we can turn swamp water into fresh water. I've seen documentaries where guys go out into the middle of the swamp with a bag and a couple of tablets and pills, and next thing you know, in about 2 or 3 days later, they got fresh drinking water. So if you can turn corroded, slimy, infested swamp water into fresh drinking water in the middle of a swamp, why can't we do that in the middle of any of these low-income cities? Because you have politicians that want to have this fear tactics, that want to control people and manipulate individuals into believing that it can't be done.
Agreed. It's much easier and much more cost-effective than we act like it is. And meanwhile, we see a press release about $8 million for a new infrastructure package, and $6 million for that because it's election season. And I'm looking at the amount of money that's being spent elsewhere, and I'm saying, man, all of the problems that we could solve. To be biblical, which is where you were just a moment ago. Water is where it all comes down to, right?
Absolutely.
The beginning of civilization is about being able to funnel fresh water inland through, aqueducts and reservoirs, et cetera, and so forth. The kingdom of heaven is at hand. Why are we not shaping it? I expect the climate to change. We're on a big ball of ice going around a big ball of sun. It's going to change. Why are we not getting to work shaping the earth? And that's really what we need to start asking. So the Salton Sea, that's one of these things. The kingdom of heaven is at hand. The Salton Sea was beautiful. It started because of an overrun, and it happened naturally, and it should be kept up on for several reasons, but let's agree there and let's move on. Dr. Ruiz said the surrounding community already has the highest pediatric asthma hospitalization rate in the state of California. The rate of hospitalization for kids in the southern part of the Salton Sea is more than double the state average. KASQ reports a USC study that shows 35% of elementary school children have breathing issues. The governor has allocated $220 million to replenish the Salton Sea. Money has been at the heart of the problem for a long time. In 2015, the ground was broken to improve water levels at the Salton Sea. And then $55.9 million was spent in state funding, mostly on studies, planning, staff, and consultants. The federal government gave another $20 million to address the issue. What's going on at the Salton Sea?
Wasted decisions. So you can't fix it in parts. Either you fix it all, or you stop lying to people. Mm-hmm. Because spending $250 million is not fixing the problem. And when you don't fix it, it's just kind of like, knowing you have a leak in your roof. You're like, well, I'm just going to go and replace the tile every time the leak shows. You see it, you look up and you see a stain, and you're like, let me go ahead and fix it. without going in and saying, I need to take all those pipes down and go fix where that leak is happening. That's the problem. We're throwing away money, saying the study. The Salton Sea is a result of bad legislation. Because, in the 1950s and 1960s, this was a tourist attraction. They were properly taking care of the Salton Sea. The flow in was great. But when you start dumping in water that was run off from agriculture, now it already had a high concentration of salt, because before it was a Salton Sea, it was a salt mine. And when the Colorado River flooded in the early 1900s, that's what created the Salton Sea. But when you stop, filling it up, because, a lot of, those, environmentalist groups in the area tell you that as it was filling up, it was taking down the solidity of the salt that was hanging around the Salton Sea. But it's going to be $1 billion project. And it's not a $20 million project. It's not a $50 million project or a $250 million project. It's $1 billion project. And it could be very much more than that. But to just keep throwing taxpayer monies every election cycle to sound good in the newspaper, you're not helping the problem. You're really just wasting money. It would be better off if you just took a barrel of $250 million in cash and just threw it in the Salton Sea. At least the money can soak up some of the salt, because that's exactly what you're doing. And you're telling the people that we're going to fix it. You're not going to fix it in part, and it's receding. You don't need a report to know the air quality is down here. Go down and visit the people, and you'll find out that, as we were down there, my family, we were down there for 4 days. 4 days in Imperial County. When we came back, my children were sick. I had to keep them out of school for 2-3 days because they were not feeling good. And they were only down there for 4 days. And the only thing I could think of is that they wasn't immune to the water down there. They wasn't immune to the air down there. And it's sad that people have grown accustomed to breathing in a toxic, to now their bodies have become immune to it. I went to many school events in the Imperial County area. And one of the things that I've never seen in my life at a school event, they was handing out breathing apparatuses. They were giving out inhalers. This is what they were giving out at the schools down there. And to sit up here and want to just continue to overlook it, that's why I have a big concern with not addressing the particulates that are in that area. And when you talk about the wind blows heavily down there. And when it pushes, it's pushing into the Coachella Valley area, Indio. They're not getting as strong doses of it, but there are people, North Shores, Salton cities and the surrounding part, they're living in this every day. It's toxins in that water. And so either we got to go all in and get it fixed, and give a full solution. And the only way you're going to fix it is to fill it up.
I agree with you 100%. And there has to be a drastic solution. The new study, and we'll talk about this in a moment, is an $832 million solution. And we'll talk about that in a moment. Like I said, there's a lot of things that you're saying here that don't sound like Republican solutions. They sound like common sense solutions. And one of the things that I was shocked to hear you say, in a list of things that I've been shocked to hear out of a Republican's mouth, is that you're not in a big support of extraction of lithium and watch folks get rich while people who live in the area are living in poverty. It's been estimated that not treating the Salton Sea could cost the area as much as $70 trillion. All of Americans' future demand, one of the reasons why I believe that this hasn't been addressed is because of the amount of lithium that's being found by the Salton Sea. And I think that to not address that is the elephant in the room. It says that this study that was released shows that all of America's future demands and 40% of the entire world's demand can be met by the lithium that's being found around the Salton Sea. They're calling it Lithium Valley, and are saying that it would supply all of the necessary lithium for electric cars. What would be your plan to replenish the Salton Sea and address these corporations trying to get rich while locals suffer?
Absolutely. And when we say it doesn't sound like a Republican talking point, I challenge anybody to go back and read the Constitution. You know, there's a phrase in there that says promote for the general welfare of others. And we hear individuals say, well, I want an American first agenda. Well, guess what? My agenda is talking about Americans. It's talking about the people who live around the Salton Sea, those are Americans. You know, people who live in the inner city, they're Americans. The people who live, you know, in any part of the community are Americans. And if we want to promote an agenda that's going to make America healthy, you know, we're as strong as our weakest link. And in a lot of those areas, if we really want to lift America all the way up, we lift up the entire part of our country, just not the parts that I live in or the parts that I support. Mm-hmm. You know, you said it. You know, think about the amount of money. You know, when you say, "Well, where's the money going to come from to fix the Salton Sea?" The Salton Sea, the money that is within the Salton Sea. There is enough money within the Salton Sea that you can fix the Salton Sea in its first year of extraction.
100%.
You know, and so, you know, you don't have to go raise taxes. Just use what's in the Salton Sea to fix the Salton Sea. You know, the very money that you're going to make off the lithium and the companies that's going to come in and, you know, drill and extract it, you can use that to fill it. And it's not going to stop the extraction. Filling up the Salton Sea does not hurt lithium extraction. Mm-hmm. At all.
Like oil,
yeah,
like water, like nuclear energy. I'm looking at lithium extraction and I'm wondering, why is that being privatized? Why is a private company going to come in and make all this money and not pay for the Salton Sea and the surrounding areas to be improved? It seems like another way to rob the American people, if I'm being honest.
And here's the thing. People think that the lithium just appeared. You know, let's just be honest. It didn't just appear overnight. It's been there. Mm-hmm. It didn't just like show it. It's been there for years. It's, you know, and so if we know it's been there and companies have been figuring out ways, you know, like I said, we used to say this in the hood, the moment the government figure out a way to tax marijuana is when they're going to make it legal. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And then what have they done? They figured out a way to tax marijuana.
Yep.
And they've made it legal. The moment they figure out how to privatize lithium, the moment they figure out how to get investors to come in, mm-hmm. that's when they made it public to people.
Mm-hmm. 100%.
But it's always been known, and this is the sad thing about the wealthy or the, you know, it's not what you know, it's who you know. You know, who you knew, the people knew way before it got made public. Like they say in stock. The moment the company go public, it's already too late to invest in it, because the ones who knew it was about to go public, they already had private moments of knowing when they go buy those shares.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, and so, you know, this is this conversation that we need to have. The Imperial County, and this is where it's at. You know, a large portion of the Salton Sea is in Imperial County. Okay, and let's just be honest where it's located. You know, each country, each state. You know, just like Texas, the oil that's in Texas belongs to the Texas. Mm-hmm. You know, and 73% of the oil that we were talking about is produced in, I think, like three states. Mm-hmm. Texas being one of them. It would be unfair. It would be unfair for lithium to be extracted out of the Imperial County, and the rest of the county gets pushed into poverty. They already lead California in poverty as it is. Mm. They have the highest unemployment rate. Mm-hmm. You know, Imperial County, you know, and this is where it's at. And so, why should a county suffer with health issues mm-hmm. to watch somebody go get a 100-foot yacht built because they just pulled what was in their backyard? Unfortunately,
it's very much the American way. To go in and extract wealth and resources out of an area. You know, we talked about Walmart earlier, going in, extracting wealth and resources out of an area, sending it to Kansas and their headquarters, and then sending the lion's share of that back to China, where everything's being manufactured. And we see it with lithium, we see it with oil, we see it in Kern County. You know, there's all these different people that they live in these counties that are extraordinarily rich, but you wouldn't know it by driving around because the people are not benefiting. The people are not benefiting.
But we have a big problem because a great portion of the Salton Sea is owned by the federal government. Mm.
So what's the excuse at this point?
If it's owned by the federal government, which means it's owned by the people.
Okay, interesting. So
I mean, it's owned by a great large portion of it, and so
I saw that there are portions underneath the Salton Sea that are owned by private companies, and that when in the past when they've tried to get legislation done to replenish the Salton Sea, everything gets stuck in the minutia of who owns what, how much water rights belongs to whom, and so does enough of the Salton Sea belong to the federal government to fast track that?
So it's interesting because if you were to go down south and you were to ask some black landowners that had land, that when the government wanted to build a freeway, there was a such thing called eminent domain. For the purpose of putting this freeway here, they were able to take away land that belonged to someone privately because the government felt that this freeway was for the whole of the people who were traveling over it. And so now when we're talking about, this discussion, and I know you got tribal, you got private, you got government, but then we got America. And that's the conversation that we keep forgetting. And this is why when I go back to the America First Act, and it's not a negative thing. And I know people want to say, America First sound like a Republican thing, but it's supposed to be the whole of everyone that's breathing in this country.
Well, I would challenge people that have an issue with America First and saying that that's a Republican talking point. There's a difference between nationalism and patriotism. Nationalism is the good of your own country to the detriment of others. Patriotism is the good of your own country and working towards that. And
so when I say America First, I'm thinking about other countries. I'm thinking that if America's better, then we can position ourselves to help more people. But because America right now is hemorrhaging, we're bleeding out trying to provide for the rest of the world. And so if we really want to be this country that becomes known for its humanitarian efforts, then let's position America to where we can effectively do this without it hindering or without it hurting America.
I would say that we're essentially saying the same thing.
Absolutely.
In that the patriotism is our own country, not to the detriment of other people. I have a question for you about the Salton Sea, and it's our last question before we move on to education in this topic. There's something called the Sites Reservoir, which has been launched in Northern California. It says that they will increase water reserves by 15% in Northern California. Overflow from the Sacramento River during the rainy season will go off into this overflow, and it will be stored there. The Gulf of California is 160 miles from the Salton Sea and is below sea level and can flow year-round. It was estimated in a new budget that $832 million, is pretty close to what you said, with $1 billion, would run a pipeline from the Gulf of California into the Salton Sea. Dr. Ruiz was asked about this, and he said it would be a great economic boom for the location, but we're not there yet. What do you think? Are we there?
Yeah, so that goes back to what I said earlier. Not only are we there, we've been past there. When you add up the amount of money over the last 10 years that has gone into projects to collect data or to talk about the Salton Sea, you'll find out that there have been hundreds of millions of dollars that have been spent on trying to, preserve or fix the Salton Sea. So we're past there. The problem is that the conversation is on lithium and not on the Salton Sea. And that's the biggest difference. We just sit up here and said how much lithium is in the Salton Sea.
For the whole world.
So $832 billion is nothing compared to the amount of money the Salton Sea is going to make.
832 million.
Yeah,
You're
832 million, excuse me.
It's
a
blip.
Yeah. His mind is made up. As we know, he's not here he didn't want to come here to answer this question. But he know that, this could have been solved a long time ago. but because the focus is on the Salton Sea and the lithium extraction, filling it up is a distant conversation.
I agree. You said 10 years. 10 years in D.C. to figure it out. Lots of legislation has been passed. Is it going to happen? I don't think so either. If you want to get it done, I think that you're looking at the right person to potentially push that forward. So I want to move into education, Pastor Hawkins, Councilman.
Yes,
education is listed as a top priority for your campaign for Congress. How would you like to revitalize and reimagine education?
Well, I would say the path to destroying poverty is through education. This comes from Scripture. My people are destroyed for a lack of knowledge. We often say, why keep introducing more money into the community when people aren't financially literate to, make business decision or create a business plan. Our public school system is a, prime example. I often ask myself, what are we preparing children for? The moment you graduate, how confident do you feel that these children from any school is really ready for day one of their life starting? And it's a tragedy when many kids that graduate in our current public school system is learning things for the first time. I think that the K through 12 experiment is a failure at a catastrophic number. When you're telling me that less than half of the students, and if we want to break it down by race, obviously it shrinks. From Asians to whites to Hispanics to blacks, but it goes further and further down. But to tell me that half of the students that graduate are not able to read at a proficient level or do math, that's frightening. It's scary. And to let me know that many students that graduate don't have critical thinking skills. And you introduce the pandemic, and there's so many different things, and I just think that the public school system is not designed, or its current model is not conducive with what the framework of our normal adulthood is prepared for or ready for. I think it's time to dismantle every aspect of the public school system and rethink, what are we preparing our children for? What future are we preparing our children for? And introduce more CTE schools. Some of the stuff that we're learning or being taught in school is irrelevant towards an adulthood. And some of the basic common sense, home ec, balancing a budget. There's things that should be taught, and even elementary school. Our children, the stuff that they're being taught in our home, because I wasn't taught this. I didn't really understand credit until my 30s, and this is a brutally honest statement, because it wasn't taught. It wasn't. The other day, I talked to a 23-year-old young lady. So you're gonna vote? She's like, no, because they never taught us what voting meant.
It's a wild thing. I graduated from high school homeless, and there's a lot that I wasn't taught. There's a lot that I learned the hard way, and there's so much that our kids do not need to learn the hard way.
Right.
Unfortunately, I'm losing faith in the public school system. I've always wanted to keep my kids in public school their whole lives. And I've broken a principle of my own for 2 of my kids and moved them into a private Christian education because of the bullying, because of how bad things were post-COVID, because myself as a parent, I wasn't allowed in the classroom to make things better. California's strict lockdown policies prevented kids in public schools from returning to the classroom for a long time. States with in-person learning did considerably better in math than states which remained closed. California schools were already bad, and they have plummeted during COVID-19. In fact, restaurants were open before our schools were. California now ranks 50th in literacy. We lost 5 points for our 4th graders, 8 points for our 8th graders, the only 2 metrics that they measure. And math and reading proficiency had already been on a downward trend. California was once first in math and sciences. What can be done to get our schools back on track?
Study from schools that are doing well. I mean, there are schools, and it's not like we don't have examples of success. There are schools that give more teachers leeways to be more engaging with the kids. The structure of the classroom. So there's a couple of things that I would first want to implement. And I think probably the biggest thing is, we need more schools. We need to shrink the class size. Too many teachers are juggling 30, 35 students in a classroom. Massachusetts is ranked number one for a reason. They're ranked number one for a reason. And why? Because their public school system only has 22 to 25 students in a classroom. And that's huge. That's a big difference. When you shrinking your class by 12 students per class. And then also too, the learning modalities are different in the classrooms. Not every student in the classroom learn it the same way. Some are kinesthetic, some are auditory, some are vision. The way in which we process things. Some of the kids who are labeled troublemakers in these classrooms maybe have more of an architectural mindset. Maybe they're more hands-on. They don't need to be sitting in a classroom learning to tell the two cities because their mind doesn't work that way. And if you're sitting in a classroom where you're bored, you find yourself, engaged in other things and getting in trouble. I think that if we start figuring out how students learn different and put them in schools that will best fit their learning style, instead of trying to force 30 students to be in that same classrooms. A lot of these students develop a mindset based on being given a failed grade every day. If I'm being told I'm a failure, K through 12, all because I don't fit in this classroom, what is this doing to me psychologically? And I just think that, reimagining school to be somewhere where it's conducive to everyday living. Look how children process things. Look how kids learn nowadays. And I'm amazed that when I watch children learn in environments that are more engaging, that are more, thought-provoking. Kids, I think we limit children by teaching them at our level to the level that we think they're at. And especially when you think of the mind being at a young age and how genius the mindset is. I think a lot of times we put more locks on children by putting them in this, frame of teaching, and then we kill off the genius in a child. And I just think that, the schools that I would love to see would be wrapped around being more imaginative, being more creative, changing the classroom, get rid of all those desks in the classrooms and make the, even like this, I can see kids coming into a room setting like this and being engaged because it's different and allow them to sit and find their personality in the different furniture, the different chair. But when I walk into a prison style structure, because that's what it looked like. It looked like it's built like a prison mindset. All the chairs is locked up in a row, and now I'm being conditioned to be an android. And so
I think it's very interesting to hear you make that statement, especially given your past of having been incarcerated. If you don't educate, you incarcerate. And we certainly do not lead the world in education. We lead the world in incarceration. We have about 4% of the world's population and almost 25% of the world's prison population, which is crazy to me. You described the classroom setting like a prison. I agree with you. I've written about the same thing in my book. I think it is time that we start destroying and deconstructing and then rebuilding something better. We've got to risk it to get the biscuit. So I have two questions for you. Around vaccines, there are a lot of people that are nervous about the COVID vaccine. I was nervous about the vaccine legislation that had been passed as SB 277 here in the state of California, which made it difficult for people to get access to that state guaranteed education without being up to date on their vaccines. It did away with the religious exemption. The CDC is likely to add the COVID-19 vaccine to the immunization schedule for children and adolescents. An advisory panel voted unanimously to recommend the vaccine for all Americans 6 months of age or older. The CDC is likely to add the COVID-19 vaccine to immunization schedules for children and adolescents. And I'm just repeating the same exact sentence. Would you vote to require the COVID vaccine for our school children in order to attend school.
Do I need an explanation do I give to this answer?
You don't have to if you don't want to.
Great, no.
Thank you for keeping it short. I don't think our children need another one.
No, I just thought that was just a
right now there's
one cut dry answers. No,
I appreciate you being cut and dry. I've been shocked by a lot of this, in that you've spoken very, very, very directly to the issues. 16 sanitation workers were fired in the state of New York for refusing vaccines. Executive Order 62 would exclude vaccine mandates for private workers like athletes and entertainers. Hollywood is always exempt from things like these. There's nothing in the record for keeping the mandate for the public sector, while private companies were able to work in the same space unvaccinated. Would you support a vaccine for public workers?
No.
Thank you. I want to jump into immigration.
Yes, sir.
Unless you have something to add.
No, because it's America got it wrong. Elected officials got it wrong. But the problem with the COVID vaccine, it was made political. The moment you introduce politics into it, you made it political, and we pushed sides, and you saw both sides of the aisle be for it or be against it when it benefited at that moment. And I think it's unfortunate. Science has said that it takes 10 years to know the effects of vaccines. And here it is, we're not even in year 2 with the COVID vaccine, and we're already talking about making it mandatory. So you're telling me with an uncertainty of its side effects, of not knowing what it's in, and we saw people based on the information that was given that once you get the vaccine, you're going to be safe. But then we saw people, my mother, she double vaxxed, triple vaxxed, multiple, and she's had COVID like 4 times. You know, and I'm like, man, at some point, you know, your immunity is good to go. But I'm not even going to
I appreciate the answer. Thank you for expanding. So the immigration, huge border or huge district. When I was looking at the district that I would potentially represent in the 41st district before I didn't get it done, I looked at the size of your district, and it stretches all the way from Hemet and San Jacinto all the way to our border with Mexico. Immigration has been a strong point of discussion for the last several years, really since I could remember being of voting age. Vice President Harris says the border is secure, but there have been 2.7 million enforcement actions in the U.S., which is the most ever, which is a lot of game playing being played with migrants being sent to Martha's Vineyard, sanctuary cities, moves to give migrants more rights, education, and health care than Californians. You're in a border district. What's your stance on our border?
So one, it's more unsecure than people realize, okay? We focus on what we see in TV, but let me talk about what you don't see and what we're not talking about. So about a few weeks ago, I walked through the border, okay? I came through the port of entry. This is the place that we often hear individuals say, well, come through the right way. Come through the port of entry. Well, guess what? There's just as many people that come through illegally through the port of entry than we realize. Because what's happening is, if you ever walk through and go down to Calexico, if you ever walk through, you'll be in a line for maybe 3-4 hours, on a good day, or you could be in the line. But I chose to walk through. And what you'll notice is that many of the individuals that are standing in this line have a manila envelope or a folder or some papers in their hand. Well, in that hand, and I'm talking to customs, they're walking through with birth certificates. And that's all they need to come through the country is a birth certificate. And that birth certificate can say anything. And what's happening on the black market is that people are selling their birth certificates over to Mexico. And people are walking through with someone else's birth certificate. Not an ID, just a birth certificate. And that's how easy it is for somebody to come through. So when we're worried about, it's great photo op to show, oh, look at them coming over the river. But the same area that we're saying that they're coming through, that's just as unsecure as coming over through the river.
Mm-hmm.
And so when we're talking about addressing immigration and border issues, we have to, one, eliminate just coming through the border with a birth certificate.
Okay.
There has to be an ID. And I was talking to Customs, and one of the things they're asking for is every person that comes through the border come through with a real ID. You know, I think the expiration date for getting a real ID is either coming up or it's passed. It's coming up. So we have to have an ID because they're not able to identify if this is the person. Mm-hmm. I walk my family through, my wife, and our children.
Mm-hmm.
They asked me, do we have a birth certificate for our children? And we didn't.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't. And we came through. These children could have been children from another country.
Mm-hmm.
But we did. We walked right on through with our children. My wife and our 2 children. Now, yeah, they're from America. Mm-hmm. But we didn't have any proof. So when we're talking about how relaxed and how, wide open our border is, I got to see it firsthand. When you walk in, you're going to look up and you're going to see Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. First little faces that you see when you're walking through the border, you're standing at the customs. And I've done this trip at least 11 times, maybe 12 in the last few months.
Mm-hmm.
And every time I've been able to come through the same way.
It's pretty incredible that you've been down to the border that many times in the last year. So you've been down there. A real ID would be a solution for coming through the border the right way.
Right.
What is the solution for what you said, people swimming across the river?
So the wall. So you can't put a wall in the river.
Okay.
But at the end, we got to start legislation to hold. It has to be a bilateral legislation between the United States and Mexico, because many people, and it ain't just Mexico, because there are people coming in, and that's another false statement too. People just assuming that everybody that's coming through the border illegally is Mexicans. You got folks coming from China. You got folks coming from Haiti, Ukrainians. There are individuals that are coming over here through the border illegally. Our Border Patrol, if there was an area of national security to invest in, is our Border Patrol.
Okay.
They're short of staff. They don't have enough agents at the border, and then it's dark. Not only do they not have enough agents, even some of the technology can be updated. But we need to really focus on strengthening the border wall. They are rebuilding, as we speak, another port of entry that's supposed to be better than the current port of entry down in Calexico. And I've gone at night and I've filmed probably about 1 o'clock in the morning, so you can see them doing the construction work on that port of entry wall. But even then, talking to Customs, they said that that's still not going to solve the problem. Majority of the area that we're seeing, the Rio Grande in Texas, there has to be a collective effort all the way across. I think what President Trump was doing with the wall was a great deterrent. But then as I was talking to Border Patrol agents, there's terrain and there's areas where you can't put a wall at. And so if anything, it'd just divert and have individuals going up into, the further parts down.
Sure.
But, there has to be, an incentive to a pathway to citizenship, because
that's the next question that I was going to ask about, because that's the wall or whatever it is that ends up happening. And it sounds like, for what you're saying, is there's a lot of places where the wall is not the answer. It's
right.
There needs to be more funding. There needs to be more staff.
It's just a deterrent,
Okay. So you would favor the wall in some places.
Well, I think America didn't always have a wall.
Yeah, correct.
And then we didn't have this large influx of people coming over either.
Mm-hmm.
And so, one, it's what is incentivizing the mass exodus, or from other countries into America?
That's a great question to ask.
And when you think about the current legislators, the administration that's in, we can go with Nancy Pelosi's own quote herself when she said we need immigration reform so we can have more Hispanics go out there in the fields and pick.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you think about it, they're thinking of domestic workers, they're thinking of people that can go out in the field. If we don't have enough people in the field, it's kind of like a slave statement. If we don't have enough people out in the field, our grapes is going to be more expensive. So,
and I think that, so I look at what she said, And of course, what she said at its face sounds terrible, but she's kind of describing it a way that a lot of people are thinking about it. And I think that I don't see a lot of white people taking out applications to go and pick fruit, and I've driven down I-5 a lot. Do you get what I'm saying?
Yeah, but at the same time too, putting this that's all Hispanics do is pick fruit too.
Sure.
Is like a racist statement.
Absolutely.
Like, that's all you're good at is agriculture. Like,
sure.
You know, once you're done picking my grapes, go back home. You know, and,
sure.
And that's an offensive statement.
Absolutely.
To even make. And so I think that right there, you know, just to limit what an individual can do, or that's the only thing that you can contribute to society.
I think at the end of the day, these are human beings.
Absolutely.
And they deserve rights. They deserve to be paid a living wage. They deserve for their kids to be able to be educated. And a lot of, people that do come and they do end up working in agriculture. Their children go on to be doctors and lawyers.
The guy I'm going against. And that's why I was offended that he didn't stand up for that statement, because he's a product of that very story. Like, this is the story that he, totes around all throughout the Coachella Valley, that I'm a son of an immigrant, a farm worker.
Yep.
And now I've gone on to UCLA and Harvard, and so I've made some.
It's a beautiful story. It's part of the American story.
American dream story.
And so when I look at this and I look at, Trump's border wall or all the things that we get lost about, I also look at the fact that granting a pathway to citizenship would give $1.7 trillion to our GDP over the course of the next decade. President Reagan in 1986 granted amnesty to 3 million people. What would you be in favor of granting amnesty to the people that are already here?
So that's a good thing. So one, before you talk about granting it, I think the American people need to understand the amount of money that comes from immigrants. Mm-hmm. And I don't think we realize that. So before you say would I be willing to, let's just go with the devil's advocate.
Okay.
Right? How much of the GDP will we be losing if we deported everyone now today?
That's a great question too.
Right? I think that people need to understand the unintended consequences of overlooking, not addressing this issue 30 years ago, 50 years ago, because this is not a new conversation that we're having. As a matter of fact, this is a talking point around election time. Immigration reform. It's a top conversation, and now with social media, it's becoming an ever more pressing conversation. And I kind of compare it to a tumor that grows in your body that attaches to a vital organ, and that the doctor is saying we're just going to have to monitor it, because if we cut it off, we can potentially cause death. But right now, it's not causing you harm either. And I think that if you look at it in that mindset, overlooking illegal immigration has caused America to now grow a problem. And however you want to look at it, and of course you can look at the illegal immigrants who have come over and have caused harm to someone, and that's where it becomes a sensitive subject, because I know a woman personally who her son was killed by an illegal immigrant. And so there's that conversation, but then that's a small percentage, because there are individuals who have come over here, maybe have been smuggled over to, bring drugs or whatever they were forced to do. And then there's individuals that come over here for a better life to build for their families. But it's estimated, 30 million in America right now? That's a tough place to be in, to say deport 30 million. And it sounds good for, many individuals that want to hear, we just need to get rid of them. But then what are you talking about getting rid of? You're talking about 30 million individuals who have contributed astronomically, tax-wise, to the infrastructure, to America. And I think that people need to think at that hard and look at that tough. They look at the history of this country and how this country was not just founded, because then it touches on the subject of everyone being an immigrant. outside of natives.
Correct.
And people say, well, that was a long time ago. That isn't now, but we're here because of that very thing. And so I'm of the point to where, what can we do moving forward? How can we make sure that people that come in today moving forward, because moving backwards is not going to help America. If anything, it's going to hurt America.
Agreed. So I'm going to fire off some questions at you. We've got a lot of topics to cover, and we've been on for a while, and I appreciate you being here to discuss these very important conversations with me in the long form. Sheriff Chad Bianco endorsed you. There's been a lot of conversations around gun legislation coming out of Texas right now, moving up on the pro-gun side, coming out of California for the last 40, 50 years, coming on the anti-gun side. The Supreme Court has come out as all of a sudden very conservative. And so a lot of people are seeing this as an opportunity. You said that you backed the blue. You're pro-Second Amendment. What were your conversations with Sheriff Chad Bianco around, and what do you plan to accomplish in regards to safety for your district?
So initially when Sheriff Bianco or Lieutenant Bianco ran for office, I've always known that there was this huge divide between law enforcement and the community, especially in the inner city community. And so I set out to want to be a bridge. We can't keep doing the same thing. We can't have this hate for law enforcement. We can't have law enforcement not being held accountable. So there has to be a communication. We keep using this quote, "It takes a village." Mm-hmm. And that was one of the conversations that the sheriff and I had. Police enforcement is part of the village. And when you talk to many people in the inner city community, just community together, it's not like they want an absence of police presence. Many people, as a matter of fact, I was talking to a gentleman today, said, man, we need more police officers. This is a black gentleman. Look, we need more police officers down here because crime is getting out of hand and people are starting to see what it looked like with less law enforcement out in the community. And so, Chad, Sheriff Bianco believes the same thing. Officers should be held accountable. There's no gray area, or, when a cop is, doing something that is outside of the protocols, they need to be held accountable. But at the same time, too, there's things in the community that we need to be held accountable to. There's things that people are teaching their children to have a hate for law enforcement. And I think that until both sides come together, churches and the community working with law enforcement, that was something that I set out to do before I got into office, being that pastor that wanted to be in the community, to be a voice, to be able to help. And I wanted to help bridge that gap. And so, I've always been somebody that was honest with the sheriff, whether it was, things that I felt like wasn't right, because I believe officers should be held accountable. And that was something that he set out to do too, was get rid of officers who he felt didn't, represent the badge well.
Sure.
And so I've met, many officers and many sheriffs that don't like bad cops either,
Mm-hmm.
And I think that, the media plays that part wrong, but, and it's not perfect. It's not perfect. And I know people say, well, being a police officer, we don't have we can't afford to be perfect, but, it's definitely getting a lot better than where it's been before.
Do you think that there is any gun legislation that needs to be revisited?
Well, I think that when it comes to gun legislation, we shouldn't be, we're borderline putting ourselves in a bad position the moment we start legislating gun control. I'm a big fan of people having the right to protect themselves. Mm-hmm. I can't even own a gun, mm-hmm. but I understand the need to have one, to protect your family. And it's getting wicked out there.
Agreed.
But I think that, there's a lot of legislation. I mean, we can go down the list of them, but, here in California, we have some strict gun laws. And I think that some of them are extremely unconstitutional.
Okay.
And I think that it's important that we start revisiting some of them and look at the root of the issues. Guns is not the cause of why somebody go and pick up that gun.
What is?
Overlooked traumas, overlooked, issues. I talked about this, before. There's a lot of children that are growing up angry in mm-hmm. a lot of communities, and because we're not addressing or we're looking past a lot of mental health problems. Mental health is real. As much as people want to not talk about it, maybe that's because it's a taboo in churches. A lot of churches for years didn't want to address mental health issues, but I think mental health plays a large part in it. And we're no longer classifying things as mental health anymore either.
I agree. Unresolved trauma, mental health in our schools. Recently, a piece of legislation was brought before the House regarding mental health access for children in schools. And only one Republican voted for it, and 205 Republicans voted against. Would you stand against your own party to give children mental health access in schools?
Absolutely. I don't think people understand the significance of that. I'm on the part of the group right now with the Riverside University Health Department, and we're working on a thing to put out there called adverse childhood traumas. And I think that it's important because many of those adverse childhood traumas, a parent might have got killed when they were young, or dad went to jail, or somebody overdosed. Anything can happen that'll cause a child to lock up, and become mentally unstable. And because it's not properly dealt with or addressed, it can grow up to becoming an adult person that eventually become a powder keg. And I think that that's what's wrong with society.
That's right.
We're not addressing it. We're just letting that child grow up. It's like that no child left behind thing. I think we need to revisit that no trauma left behind.
I think that that's great. I think that if you are triggered, there's something inside you that is explosive, and that needs to be looked at. That needs to be analyzed. So I'm glad that you said that you would take on your own party. I appreciate you for not mincing words there. So I want to get on to prison reform. 75% of people in prison can't read or write. That was a statistic that you brought to my attention that I thought was pretty alarming. If you don't educate, you incarcerate. We talked about this. We lead the world in incarceration. How can we teach the incarcerated while they are incarcerated to help them from returning back into the system?
So one, you got to ask yourself, is that something that really wants to be done? Because prison is filled with reoffenders.
Okay.
And when you think about that, you think about the statistics of what 75% of the guys that are in prison are there because not to say that they are high school dropouts, but because there's no ambition, no goals, no drive. And a 30, 40-year-old man paroling from prison that can't read or write, you think he's about to go get a job at McDonald's?
No.
Especially in this current climate where people want to go viral. And it's embarrassing for a 40-year-old man to go apply, or a woman to go apply for a job in front of a 23-year-old manager that's now making fun of him, decide to videotape his struggles or her struggles. You got kids that know how to embarrass people and shame people.
Agreed.
I've said this before. People shouldn't be sentenced to a time in prison. They should be sentenced to rehabilitation in prison. And that's the problem. A lot of guys that get out of prison are not rehabilitated. And that's just a brutal truth. Prison does not do a good job of rehabilitating guys. Most guys that go to prison find themselves becoming numb to incarceration. The moment you step on a yard and you grab that net sack with your laundry in it and your tissue, and you go throw your stuff on the bunk and you make your bed and you lay down and you grab a magazine. You probably been going through R&R, the rehabilitation. When you come through the prison, they give you your bedroll and you go lay down. Most guys go to sleep that first night. And most guys, when they get in jail, when they get locked up, they sleep the first couple of days because you've been ripping and running so much. So now, it's kind of like you just finally get some rest. And then when the hardest time a guy ever do in prison is going through court. Getting up in the morning at 4 a.m., get on the bus, going down to court. But once you get into prison, it's the reason why they call it program. Guys are programmed. And the moment you're programmed, you just count calendar days. And you really don't start counting your days until you get into the year of your parole date. So by then, you and it's just it's a everyday cycle. You get up, you go out the door, you walk to the chow hall, it's a circle, you come back in. And so there's no rehabilitation. You're conditioned to be dependent.
And we put so much money into the prison system while not improving the conditions for the prisoners, not trying to rehabilitate. And so it's become a difficult thing watching these private prisons really offer very little, charge very much for everything. And, they talk about shutting them down in 10 years. It's like, why are we not pulling off the Band-Aid? But I've got a lot of topics that I want to cover kind of quickly, so I'm going to ask you. There's been 10-year plan after 10-year plan to solve homelessness in San Francisco and L.A. We saw Governor Newsom sign 40 laws into law last month regarding housing. What can be done right now to start solving homelessness?
So housing, one, if you really want to fix homelessness, and let's just not say homeless, we have a housing shortage problem. And one of the reasons why we have a housing shortage problem because it's not an incentive for developers to build because it's so expensive to build. The moment a developer put a shovel in the ground, there are already millions of dollars into the project just dealing with fees, impact fees, environmental fees, CEQA, there's tons and tons of fees. So, the average cost of building a home is $175 to $350 per square foot. Well, the average Californian makes $36,000 a year, so you're not even able to afford the cheapest building home in California. Now you're talking about homeless. Homeless is another problem that politicians really don't want to solve, because if you solve homelessness, you remove a big portion of your campaign speech, and now you have nothing to really stand on, because the backdrop of homelessness is a campaign strategy to get people to go and vote. Legislation prevents fixing homelessness.
Everywhere that we look, we see more warehouses. You said they're building them to fill crap that's been built in China. And there's just more and more warehouses. People are working for Amazon, making $36,000 a year, not able to buy a home, not able to rent a home. The average income needed to buy a home in this area is about $79,000, which means if two Amazon workers were married, they still could not qualify for home ownership. Where do you stand on unions and unionizing?
So that's a tough subject. My wife's part of the union. In some ways they're good, and in some ways they're bad. I've met union workers that find themselves out of work because they can't get the job because there's companies that are willing to not work with unions. And I think that at the end they know how to go and negotiate a good price, a good wages, but then are individuals getting what they're putting into the union worker or putting into their union dues. I'm not opposed to unions other than the teachers union. I'm just sorry. It'll probably be the one union I have a big gripe with. But at the end of the day, I would love to see individuals not put a stronghold on business or being put a stronghold on work, because now you control the market. And when you're a union employee or you're a union worker, you're controlling other businesses from being able to get in and bid on projects, because unions have such a stronghold on it, which one of the big reasons why the cost of labor, the cost of building is so expensive.
Sure.
Because it's controlled by a lot of these unions.
You mentioned a healthy family agenda. What does this mean?
So, to quote President Obama, an absent father, a child is more likely to go to jail. And I think that we've gotten away from the nucleus of the family. There's been an attack on the, nucleus of the family, the father in the household, and even, and I get it, sometimes it don't work out, but, to sit up here and incentivize a mother to do this by herself, while pushing the father away, that's been all too much of the conversation that has happened for years, by not encouraging the father to be a healthy part in the family. I've seen it all personally with myself. My wife and I, we had went through a divorce. We were separated for a time being. She's sitting right here now. But at that time when she was raising our son on her own down in San Diego, I would get him, on the weekend. But that wasn't enough. But the moment we brought ourselves back under one roof, we saw a significant improvement in his, his confidence and his speech and his learning. There says something about having both parents involved in parenting. And that's why I would love to incentivize children waiting until they get married. There's a plan that I have called the Marriage Family Act. And, I know we have, short of time, but, it's something to incentivize individuals to want to wait to get married, to start a family, and to having a seed of support to where you're not struggling to get started.
What's your stance on gay marriage?
So, I'm a pastor. My biblical Christian values, I don't support gay marriage, just plain and simple. It's not a legislation, and I don't think we should even be legislating marriage, period. But I know that with my conviction, I've never married a gay couple. I never will marry a gay couple because it just goes against my biblical beliefs. So
when you get into mandates for morality, and you said that you don't want to pass legislation on marriage, one of the things that people are worried about is this not just getting returned to the states, but this actually becoming law of the land. If gay marriage goes on the ballot, will you vote against gay marriage?
I will.
Okay. Yeah. I appreciate you being forthright about that.
I will. Yeah, I would not vote in support of it because, one, the moment my personal salvation gets in, I will walk away from the elected position.
Okay. So religious principle over.
It's not even religious. That's just because that's my beliefs in God.
Okay. So you've gone out of your way to address the Black community. I feel like you've received a fair amount of criticism from the Black community. Businesses of being Black on Fox Soul, an all-Black panel on school choice. You spoke with Black Voices of the Valley with Mayor Malcolm Lilienthal. What's your message for Black voters that you've been working to convey?
So one of the messages I've been sharing with, and it really comes down to at what point do we get into being actively involved in the American dream, pre-slavery, America, Blacks in America, and you could even say post-slavery during the Jim Crow era and Reconstruction period, and even up to the 1965s. Many Blacks believe that we didn't really get a full voice into the Voter Right Act of 1965. But what I really want to share with the Black community is where we are in 2022. And I often said, if we had the voices and the leadership of 1960s and 1922, we would be in a better position, place, because there was more organization, more structure, more understanding of voting, and actually having legitimate agenda for the community. There's a lot of information that we're overlooking as far as getting involved. I look at Blacks that vote less than 40% in the elections, where I look at whites that vote about 74, 75%. Wow. So you wonder why agendas are getting done and money is getting moved around, is because many Blacks aren't participating in school board meetings, and not everywhere, but in some areas. And that's one of the things too, because sometimes we can generalize it, and we do have Blacks that are engaged in these different areas. But I would love to see more minorities, Blacks and Hispanics, and it's not because whites understand voting. Mm-hmm. A lot of, in the white community, they understand the purpose of getting on the school board and going to these school board meetings and understanding, letting your voice be heard. And a lot of individuals don't know that, their vote matters, their vote count, or they believe it doesn't. And that's one of the things that I just want to educate, because I feel like a lot of the excuses, a lot of the anger and frustration that we make is really things that are being taken out of content, or lies that have been told over the years that people have believed. And because they've been believing it, they've been responding in a way to where it's not true. And that's something that I just want to help change. I really appreciate your time. I really appreciate everybody watching. I have two more issues to address with you: healthcare and corruption. I think a lot of people are catching on to and experiencing the problems that the Black community has been facing for years. All kinds of people are starting to say things like, maybe government isn't working for us. Maybe they're not working for anyone. Your opponent is a doctor. He said that he will fight for a right to health care. Yet when Speaker Pelosi had a chance to bring it to a vote, she didn't. He said he will take a surgeon's approach to health care. I'm wondering if this includes turning people down for lack of coverage. According to a Harvard study, nearly 45,000 people die every year because of lack of insurance.
The number one fundraiser on GoFundMe is for unpaid medical bills. The number one cause in America for bankruptcy is unpaid medical bills. And yet Speaker Pelosi would not even bring it to a vote when she had it. What is the answer to the healthcare problem in America?
There isn't one. I mean, it's such a complicated problem because healthcare is expensive in America. Let's just be honest with it. And I think because we don't see the decisions that we've made over the years of driving up the cost of medicine here in the United States. There are a lot of drugs that, we see over in other countries, Mexico. I was in Mexico the other day and the whole road is filled up with medical. I think that it's important that we understand why people aren't getting access to, good medical. The biggest thing that I would encourage is that we start to get more diversity in the medical field. You start getting more individuals to go to school because we have a shortage in the medical field. If I was a doctor right now with all the, being forced to get vaccinated, getting fired, it's not an attractive field. That was even the question I asked Dr. Ruiz. Why do you want to go back to DC when you're an ER doctor? And so, there goes the supply and demand. Because we have a shortage in the medical field, the demand is short, but people are getting sick every day. So until we get more people going to medical field, it's going to be expensive.
It's difficult because California leads the country in bankruptcies. Governor Newsom didn't allow California's version of Medicare for All to go for a vote when he knew that he had the votes as well. And I think that what you just said is there isn't an answer. Might be the reason why they didn't allow it to even go to a vote. Yeah. That's disappointing.
I mean,
but if it's honest.
Yeah, there isn't. It's not something that people want to hear, but the reality of it is, some things we've made so complicated and so difficult. Like this is a problem that we've created that now we literally don't even have a solution for it.
Congressman Ruiz said that that he voted for the Women's Health Protection Act, which protects women in the event of incest, rape, harm to life of the woman. He said that America should have codified Roe v. Wade. You have said that abortion is not health care. Can you clarify?
Well, yeah. So, when we talk about healthcare, right? When we talk about the access to healthcare, when initially individuals were asking for healthcare, they were asking for, cervical cancer, providing meaningful healthcare. Abortion has become a profit center, and we're disguising it under the term healthcare. I wish people would talk about the percentage. And it's not to say that it minimizes any woman that has been raped or dealing with incest. But 9 out of 10 women that are raped, right, even the number is less than 1% But 9 out of 10 actually choose to keep their child. And so when you break down the numbers and that we're focusing on, we're about to change this whole legislation under disguise of healthcare. And that's when you're talking about a conversation between a doctor and being private, because you're talking about mental health issues. And now you're bringing in, because, this is a different set of issues. But when I say that abortion is not healthcare, you're talking about the child. There's a child in the womb. And I wish that we would show a dramatic video of what an abortion looked like. An actual abortion, snatching limb from limb out from a woman's body, and then showing the brutal reality of an abortion. People are just minimizing that. It's just a vacuum going in there, sucking out. No, it's a very damaging, and it's more damaging to a woman's body. It's more mentally destructive to women. Talk to women who have had abortions, of how, years later, the mental traumas of an abortion. So if you're calling it healthcare, then what is the aftermath of an abortion called?
So the U.S. is the only industrialized nation on the planet which doesn't mandate parental leave. There are 124,000 kids in foster care. Being a single parent is difficult in America, to say the least. We saw the repeal of Roe v. Wade. We saw that, we look at the barbarism. And you said people saw a video of an abortion, and I think it might change their mind. I agree, it is extraordinarily barbaric. The postpartum abortion is extraordinarily barbaric. But I do also look at the other end of it, and I look at, this 10-year-old rape victim who we thought, hey, this might not be real. She was raped by her uncle, went across state lines to try to get an abortion, was unable to get it. It ended up, causing some issues or whatnot. Is there a middle ground?
Yeah, and that's what I said. And when you're talking about the mental health, and that's where, because, when a child, and you're talking about scarring a child, that's a difficult conversation. One that I wouldn't want to have, with my 10-year-old child, because I do have a 10-year-old child. And it's just unfortunate that the only discussion that we're having is that, like, this is the normal conversation, and we'll call anything else anecdotal, and we're using this as the high talking point to push this emotional button, and as though abortion is the only solution to a woman being pregnant. We're not talking about the overwhelming number of women who have an abortion just to have an abortion, just because they don't want to have the child. We automatically go to the anecdotal, discussion of, what if somebody's raped, or what if somebody has incest? And I think that that's an unfair focus, because we're building this around that own talking point. What about the women? Can we ban? Let's start with the 83% of the women who just want to have an abortion.
Okay. So, what about the fathers, right? And is there a punishment there too, right? So, I guess my question to you would be then, those 83%, what is the punishment for abortion?
Well, here's the thing, and that, it goes into should it be, looked at as murder? Should somebody be convicted as murder? Well, it should just be banned. It should just be outlawed. There should be, when we talk about self-care, right? There should be accountability, because, the moment you shut off access, what happened the moment Roe v. Wade was overturned?
What?
The next day, contraceptives sales went out through the roof, right? Women went out, Plan B pill. So it seems like the moment that law was overturned, people decided down to today is this day I want to be accountable. Now I want to be responsible. So is it possible that this legislation is creating an irresponsible behavior, that we're automatically conditioning ourselves to not have to think about sexual transmitted disease? We don't have to think about anything else. Like, I have this law that protects me, that if I want to be careless tonight, and I think that that's the mindset that we should be looking at. What is this law doing psychologically to women, causing, premarital sex, and causing, individuals to not think about, a healthy family, or not think about, right decisions. Like, we're thinking about the outcome, and never thinking about what this law is doing, or what it's providing, or what it's creating. I think that, some laws, like this particular law right here, is supporting an irresponsible behavior. And because it's gone unchecked for so long, now it's time to will it in. People are now frustrated because it's taken away their license to be promiscuous. And you're talking about an unwanted pregnancy. Is it possible that, if we change this law, that we wouldn't have any unwanted pregnancies, that we now have individuals that make smart decisions about who they decide to lay with? We automatically think that this is about, taking my hands off my body, but then, people will be conscious about who they sleep with. They won't just go to the club tonight knowing that I can go get a, abortion in 3 weeks, and then just look at the evilness that's coming behind it. There's a video of a young lady doing a video right in front of Planned Parenthood, and the song is called Murder on My Mind. So if someone can go make a viral video and call it Murder on My Mind.
Yeah.
That's what she called it. And it was glorified. It was passed along. It was supported by many activists in the Planned Parenthood neighborhood.
And what's wild is the way that these extremists get held up on both sides to really make it very difficult to find a common ground. But what I'm finding is, and I listened to Dennis Prager for years, read his books. I prefer clarity over agreement, and I think that this is going to be an important point to establish that. Making something illegal, of course, doesn't make it not happen. Murder, drug use, et cetera, and so forth. So this is the last time that I'll ask you about this, and then we'll move on to congressional corruption, which is going to be a lot of fun, and then we're going to end the night. My last question is, if it's illegal, if we make abortion murder, what is the punishment?
Punishment for murder.
Okay.
I mean, if you're willing to put a legislation behind it, and like I said, I'm using their own language of what they're calling it. The song was called Murder on My Mind. So not only is it murder on my mind, it's premeditated murder because you're thinking that this is what I'm about to go do. So if you're willing to call it that, you're willing to make a song and glorify it, then I think that we should be able to look at it the same way and say, let's create an understanding of what you're calling it, because that's exactly what it is.
Thank you for your clarification. There's a lot of congressional corruption that's happening. We're seeing it a lot with insider trading, and we're seeing it from both parties. Where do you stand on insider trading, stock trading, all of the insider information that Congress is benefiting on?
So I don't think anyone in Congress, Senate, governor should be able to hold stock. Plain and simple.
Appreciate
the
it.
Family, the immediate family, husband, wife. I don't think that, because there's too much influence in it. You can help control the flow of the market, and so I think it's important to, I think that, elected officials are overpaid in Congress. And, I've watched, I think somebody was telling me AOC is now worth millions. She went in with a few dollars. And
only in Congress.
Now she's worth millions, and I think it's unfortunate. And that's why when I hear people say that, I feel it at the gas pump too when you're making these campaign speeches. No, you're not, because taxpayers is paying for your gas. So you're not feeling it at the pump. You don't even know what the pump feels like. Many of them haven't even filled up at the pump. So I just think that it should be banned from any elected officials owning stock.
You've been lumped in as an election denier, as a MAGA Republican. A lot of people are being discredited by saying, oh, this person's an election denier, regardless of whether or not you've even commented on it. And what I'm seeing is that since World War II, the deep state has influenced elections in over 80 countries, including Italy, Iran, Japan, Brazil, Costa Rica, Chile, Uruguay, El Salvador, Panama, Nicaragua, Ukraine, Russia, Mongolia, and Palestine. We know through declassified documents the atrocities the CIA and the FBI have committed on our own soil. Is it possible that our own election was stolen?
There's this quote that I love. It says, "This is the most stolen election I've ever been a part of. The Democrat Party has used racism to stuff the ballot boxes. And I believe that this election was stolen." Frederick Douglass, 1866. This is a conversation that has been talked about almost every election cycle. Hillary Clinton, 2016, collusion, Russians, WikiLeaks, Stacey Abrams, election tampering, and it's interesting that, this has been a conversation and a talk for years. And the sad thing about it is that many voters support IDs to vote. Many, overwhelmingly, but has refused to push a legislation to secure the elections. And until you can unequivocally tell me that the elections are secure, it's impossible to suggest that any election was 100% without fraud or without tampering.
Great answer. The democracy, sorry, go ahead.
And that's 2020 back to 1866.
We saw it in the last election cycles. We saw it in 2016. We saw a lot of information released about the DNC and Bernie Sanders and the leaked emails. The Democracy Index from Economist Intelligence Unit has been tracking democracy since 1946. The U.S. is ranked in 26th, and it's called a flawed democracy. The Democracy Matrix from the German Research Foundation ranked the U.S. as 36th and called America a deficient democracy. In 2016, like you said, many Democrats were angry because they feel the election was stolen from Bernie Sanders by the DNC and Hillary Clinton. Leaked emails confirmed this suspicion was true. In 2020, we watched Kamala Harris, Pete Buttigieg, and Amy Klobuchar all drop out of the race at the same time and throw their weight behind Joe Biden. I can see where people would question this democracy and the election results. I can see why people question our democracy in general. You told me where you stand in 2020. What's the answer to elections in the future?
So, to move forward, right, we have to free up the election from the possibility of corruption. And as it stands, here it is in California. The election is 30 days out from November 8th. Many of us, the ballots went out on October 10th. And so now, you have so much time in between. I cast my ballot. I can go down to the voter registration office tomorrow and spoil that ballot and vote again. And so will they throw away my previous ballot? It's a possibility. Am I confident that they did? I'm not sure. Because it wasn't mailed back to me? No, it wasn't. And so, the elections, and it's crazy because many other countries don't have to deal with this.
Mm-hmm.
I think that, we need to get back to same-day elections. We need to federalize the election holiday. It needs to be a federal holiday, which would give every American time to get off and go vote. I don't believe that we need to, deny access to the, election place. As many election chambers we need to open up, they just need to be secure. Train up people, We need to hire real election workers. Many of the people who work at these election polls are working at it for the first time with 45 minutes of training. And so there's too much room for error. I've already experienced 2 issues myself running for office, dealing with the Riverside Voters Office in this election cycle. When I went to go pick up my papers to run for Congress, they gave me papers to run for a state legislator. I was asked to fill out papers for an FPPC, which running for Congress, I'm under the FEC, which is the Federal Election Commission. But they gave me state papers. It's the reason why Manuel Perez is running unopposed, because the woman who was going to run against him was given the wrong papers. And by the time she went to go file, it was past the deadline. So the supervisor in the 5th district is running unopposed because of election issues. Right now, there's voter registration guide that's going on all out in the district. My voter information, I don't have a candidate statement on the voter registration guide. Why? Because it was not printed in there, because I wasn't clear on, I didn't want to change it. I wanted to keep the same candidate statement from the primaries. And because the person who was, giving me the information didn't say, hey, you got to pay an additional $4,000 to pay for, another candidate statement. And so, there's information that just wasn't being taught or shared because, you're dealing with people that are new down in the voter registration office. Same day election is going to secure a lot of it. If we're going to use Dominion machines, or, whatever voting machine we need to use, they need to be secure right after the election. Put on a Brink truck with heavily secured security and taken and be audited the same day as the last ballot is going through, to make sure that every machine that counted a ballot was fully operational, and the report needs to be given through a third party. You can do it the same way we did the redistricting with independent Republicans and Democrats, have everybody in the same room working on the auditing machine, then IDs. We need to know who's voting. And that's just it. I don't think there's a problem with that.
I have my last question of the night. Extraordinarily grateful to your wife. Extraordinarily grateful to you for your time. Thank you so much. And then we'll see if we have a couple more from anybody else in here. My last question is about the Capitol attacks. We know about Operation Northwoods and other declassified CIA and FBI documents that have shown that the CIA has at least brought up the possibility of carrying out attacks on American citizens on American soil. JFK fired those responsible for Operation Northwoods, and we saw what happened to him. Governor Gretchen Whitmer was going to be kidnapped, allegedly, until we found out that 14 of the 17 attackers were FBI agents. Russiagate turned out to be a complete hoax, and that played out during the entire term of President Trump's first term in office. The Hunter Biden laptop ended up being completely true, and that was called a hoax. In fact, Hunter Biden, we found out, was being paid by a Ukrainian energy company. People act like history started last year. America has, of course, been around coups all over the world, but the difficulty that I'm looking at is I'm looking at a Capitol that was attacked. I'm looking at riots that have taken place all over the country. And both sides say that their side was justified in their frustrations, but the other side was not. There are not a lot of people like yourself going out and trying to be the bridge between the law and lawlessness. What do we need to do going forward to avoid that civil war that you and I were talking about 2 hours ago?
So, one, it needs to start with the agenda of those who are in office. January 6th committee right now has become the big distraction from all the other, top 25 issues that people are dealing with. If I were to give a survey and I were to list 25 things on there and name them from level of importance, where do you think January 6th will rank amongst the voters? If I had inflation and gas prices and, and because it's a hot topic conversation that drives people. They want to use January 6th as a talking point to get people frustrated enough to the polls. As a nation, we look at the agenda of many people that's in office, and it goes back to the question in the beginning, why aren't people willing to come and sit down and have a debate? Why aren't people willing to sit down and come discuss? Because then they'll have to give a full answer of what's really in their heart, what's really their agenda. And then you'll find out after, I don't know how long we've been here, maybe a couple hours.
2.5 hours almost.
Yeah, you'll find out that a person genuinely is being controlled by other individuals. Mm-hmm. And we're not electing people for the people. We're electing people for the puppets, and whoever the puppet master is. That's why people can't get up and say, I would stand against my own party, because I'm thinking about America. Before there was parties, there was America. Mm-hmm. The Constitution was written, and it wasn't written as Republicans and Democrats. The question was asked, what did you come up with a republic if you can keep it? A country governed by the people for the people. And in order for us to secure the democracy in this country, we got to get back to electing people from America, with America on their mind, people that's not driven by ideologies, people that are not divided by cultural wars, the people who can look across the aisles and say, that's an American. I need to see that person, living their best life. And then I can look across the country and I can say, these people need to have access to fresh water. They don't need to be worried about being butchered. But I need to stabilize America. And until we can look at America as a fractured place, until we can look at America as a divided place and not be ignorant of what's happening here in this country, because we're trying to fight wars all over the country. We're trying to establish democracy all over the world. We're showing a bad example of that to the rest of the world. Like, what are we showing the rest of the world when they see America. It's becoming a laughingstock. And we see that with, out of the 350 million people in this country, Joe Biden was our best pick to be the voice of America to the rest of the world. And when I look at the president and I look at the statue of the president, I don't see what America's supposed to look like. I don't see the strength in his speech. I don't see the stamina in his walk. I don't see the character. I don't see the voice of America coming from it. It has nothing to do with Democrat or Republican. It has everything to do with what I'm looking at when I see what America's supposed to look like. And that's not what America is supposed to look like. If that's the description of America, we look bad.
Good night, yeah. Wonderful job. Any questions from anybody?
Sure.
Yes.
Step up.
Please.
To the mic. So, Councilman and Pastor Hawkins. My name is JP.
How you doing,
And good. How are you this evening? Thanks for coming out.
Oh,
Very
thank you.
interesting.
Absolutely. Yes, sir.
So these questions can be very simple or very hard. But hopefully they're simple for you.
Okay.
So it always comes down to the why, right? So why are you running for this office, and why should I vote for you?
Well, I'm gonna answer backwards.
Sure.
Why you should vote for me is because I came here so you can ask me that question. So right there, anytime you can have the opportunity to speak to your elected officials, it should say something about that person. I believe representatives, people who you elect, should be available at any moment. My wife would tell you, I pride myself on being available. You can go to my website right now, and as soon as you log onto my website, I'm going to get a chime that you're on my website. And if you stay on long enough, I'll be able to text you, and I'll send you a message, and I'll say, hey, I'm available for questions. This is not a robot. Mm-hmm. And this is me responding to you. I'm actually taking out the time to find out, one, what you're looking for on my website, because maybe the answer is not there. It could be general. I have my topics, but you might be looking for something personal. And then I take your personal issues, because I'm sure that you're not the only person that has that issue. And I'm good at representing people. I'm good at taking what's on your heart to go find a solution. I was at an event a month ago, and there was a lady that was sitting at my table, and there was a dessert that we had ran out. We were at the casino at a State of the City in Banning, and there was this dessert called a cannoli. And by the time she went over there to go get one, they were all gone. And this was at the beginning of the luncheon. I got up and I left, and I went and found the bakery shop down the way. And it took me about an hour. But by the time I came back, I had 2 cannolis in a box, and I handed it to this lady. She was a librarian in the city of Banning. Mm-hmm. And she couldn't believe that I took the time to go find these cannolis for her. She had asked somebody, and they told me we was out. But that's the type of person I am. I take the time out to go, even the smallest thing that means something. And that meant a lot to her. I'm not perfect. I don't have all the answers. I'm pretty sure that when I get in Congress, I'll have a staff, legislative directors that'll take the time out to go get me the right legislation so I can go and meet with the people. And that's what my job is. As Henry Ford was once asked a question about, was he capable or qualified to do the job? And he responded with, I don't know all the answers, but I have these buttons on my desk that if you ask me the question, one of these buttons I push, whoever comes through that door is going to be able to answer that question. The why I'm running is really important. I didn't have an agenda for why I started running. I knew that myself personally, the people talking in DC or when I watch C-SPAN, they didn't sound like the people that I know. Every time I listen to politicians talk and then presenting something on the floor, it didn't sound like the everyday issue. They were easily led by the same 3 questions: abortion, transgender, LGBTQ, gun control. Well, guess what? There's more issues on the table than abortion, LGBTQ, and gun control. And if that's all you want to talk about, then you're missing what everybody's really going through, what everybody's really dealing with. And I had said this earlier before you came in. I don't know if you got a chance, but my race kind of like was, Forrest Gump when he started running. My run has inspired people. When I ran for city council, I wanted to challenge some of the narratives that was out there. I'm an ex-felon. And when I ran for office and got elected, it changed the mindset of what's possible,
Sure.
what could be done. It's like the Wright brothers, putting an airplane in the sky for the first time. And as long as you continue to tell people what they can't do and there's no evidence for it, they'll always be able to say, well, it's the white man that's holding you back, and it's systemic racism, and it's all the policies and all the laws. Well, what happens when someone with a background like myself, with all the setbacks, with me starting a race late and still coming at the finish line before everyone else, then what is your excuse then? But I don't have an agenda. As a matter of fact, as I started running, when it was the 36th Congressional District, I didn't have water as a top issue because that wasn't a top issue in the 36th Congressional District. But the moment the district was redrawn to Imperial and going down there, that was a top issue for the Imperial County. So because that was a top issue for Imperial County, immigration wasn't a top issue in my district. But when I went down to Imperial County, border town, immigration became a top conversation for me. So I'm willing to, grab people's issues and take it and run with it as though it's my own. I know how to make your issues personal.
Absolutely. I've heard your messaging is really improved since we first talked a year and a half ago. And you had a great message then. Of course, there are things that we disagree about, as you should, as human beings. You should not disagree with everybody about everything. Otherwise, there's something wrong with your brain, I think. So we got a couple of online questions. How would you feel about deploying U.S. troops in the United States to handle issues here, i.e. fight forest fires, public works projects, etc.?
How do I feel about deploying U.S. troops?
I think that's a National Guard thing. I don't think that you could do U.S. troops on American soil.
Yeah. That's definitely National Guard. I mean, I think if anything, we need to, strengthen up how we recruit, here, to really focus on getting more people involved, because I'd rather use our military to secure our country foreign. It's just, I'm not in favor of seeing military troops, I've seen many scars that has left in the images in the city of Detroit, during the 1960s. It's not a strong positive look when our own have to, control, because, now you're getting into dangerous, places with our military. And the last thing I want to do, this is family, having to be put in position to control family, and that's.
I think his point was he was asking about fighting forest fires in California, because currently we have prisoners doing that, or things like that. Okay. Public works projects for California State Guard. I think that might be where he was going. Final question, unless you wanted to address that.
Yeah, no. Like I said, I mean, and even then, I would have to, look at the. How that will work out. Get whoever that is, please, follow me, because I would love to look at that a little bit more in detail before.
Message for home, Zachary Buck, go ahead and message Brian Hawkins. He's not a hard guy to get a hold of.
Me a message, I'd rather have a full concrete of how that would look before I weigh in on it.
Start speculating. There seems to be a lack of accessibility to resources for female combat veterans due to commitments to their families. This often meant they were able to utilize resources provided. What would you suggest could be done for our overlooked female veterans to have access to resources for assistance to programs to receive help with PTSD and MST?
That goes back to, that question of, wishing that our military would be more loud, because that question is probably, that question alone makes you wonder why, or even people even think that is that even happening? And given the fact that that's a question that you're given, apparently it is happening. So obviously we have to do a better job of raising awareness. We have to do a better job of making sure our female combat officers, the soldiers, are getting the equal access. And this isn't this whole, women pay more type thing. This is, they put on that uniform, they swear under that same, Constitution, should be given the same equal access, as any, male soldier. So to see inequalities like that, it's disheartening. And I would definitely love to make that a top priority as well too. So please message me on that, because it's frustrating to hear that. And you hear stories about women being treated unfairly in the military, but to actually have that as a question is very disheartening. And in 2022, not realizing that our, women in the service are not being given equal access is frustrating.
I agree. It is disheartening. It is very much a real issue that our women in uniform are facing. I'll tell you what. Thank you. Do you have a final message for voters?
Yeah, I want you guys to think about this. For someone to sit up here, I don't know what time I get up in the morning. 5 o'clock. I'm out the door about 6. What time is it right now?
It is 9:39 p.m.
9:39 p.m. He ended it. I didn't.
Amen.
I didn't ask for it to be ended. He ran out of questions, right? But this is just who I am. You may not like all my answers. Is there more knowledge that I can gain later on? Absolutely. Are there people that's going to listen to this and say, hey, can you look at this from this perspective? Absolutely. I can look at anything with a common sense approach, make it make sense. But as it stands right now, our company's in jeopardy. Our country is in a tough place right now, and everyone's feeling it. Especially those at 59% are living paycheck to paycheck. And this is what this fight is all about. It's not a Republican Democrat. And, it's probably more frustrating when I hear, oh, you don't sound like a Republican. Well, issues shouldn't be political. Regardless of what party you're with, you should be willing to look at the issues and weigh in on them, and not just hide behind a vote or hide, away from the people, but come in and weigh on it. Let the people see your heart, how you feel about these issues. Some of these questions have nothing to do with majority of the country, but many of them have a lot to do with everyone. Inflation is affecting everyone. The cost of living is affecting everyone. Homelessness is affecting everyone. Housing shortage is affecting everyone. Our education system is affecting everyone. And these are some of the issues. When I think about the founding fathers, slavery was a conversation that was talked about during the founding of our country. And there was a reason why they wasn't able to abolish slavery in 1776, because some of the founding fathers owned slaves themselves. But they were able to come together on a collective understanding and say, hey, we got to free ourselves from Britain. And this is where we're at today. Maybe you're pro-life or pro-choice, but that's a discussion that you're not even thinking about having a child right now. But what issues are important right now that we could be addressing? Energy independence, is an important conversation. Housing shortage is an important conversation. Water is an important conversation. And if we don't address these issues now, all the other social issues and everything else is, I'm not gonna say they're irrelevant, but when you weigh them out on what's important, and that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to get off the top things. When I think about the to-do list and prioritizing, I'm prioritizing what's important and what we can get off, because here it is in 2022 and we're still talking about water. We're still talking about homelessness. We're still talking about veterans. We've had veterans since World War I. We've had veterans since the Revolutionary War. Think about that. And here it is today in, November 2nd, 2022, we're talking about veteran issues. And so I'm asking people to have confidence in having just a sane, simple, common sense voice going to DC. Somebody that's willing to sit here for 3 hours and listen to every question and weigh in. Just imagine what I would do going to Congress. So I'm asking for your support. realpastorbrian.com. Go to my website, send me a message. But I want to say thank you Mr. Serpa, I really appreciate coming up here. It was an honor and a privilege to be on here. Thank you for those who are here. And, November 8th, let's make history. As my wife said, said that November 8th is an IQ test for the rest of this country. And we're going to find out how smart we really are when we vote.
Excellent.
God bless you guys.
Thank you so much, Pastor, Councilman. I appreciate everybody watching and tuning in for some discord, which is incredibly important to our democracy. Should we lose it or should we not lose it? I appreciate everybody watching. Thank you for your time. Nearly 3 hours on a Wednesday night. You've made yourself available throughout the campaign. You've been extraordinarily easy to get a hold of. I would encourage anybody that has anything that was brought up tonight to reach out directly to Pastor Brian E. Hawkins on Facebook, Twitter, through his website, because without a doubt in my mind, you will get an answer back. Appreciate you all for watching. Have a great night, everyone, and go out and vote on November 8th.